Chapter 1171. The man yelled and kicked at the same time. Damn brat, let go! Let go! The other men kicked and hit Mu Yichen. They even reached out to pull his hair. Mu Yichen refused to let go no matter what. He bit the man's hand so hard that he wanted to break the man's bones. The man was in so much pain that his limbs trembled as if he had been electrocuted. In the warehouse, the sound of a pig being slaughtered could be heard. At the side, the other men were anxious. They picked up the whip at the side and whipped him on the back. Slap, slap, let go. Damn it, I told you to let go, but you still won't let go. Mu Yichen groaned. He was in so much pain that beads of cold sweat seeped out of his forehead. However, he was a tough guy. Even if his body was stiff from the pain, he braced himself and refused to let go. His eyes were red, as if they were stained with blood. He glared at the men in front of him. His gaze was as sharp as a sword, sharp and cold. Blood gushed out from the corner of his lips. He had obviously bitten his hand. The sound of the whip lashing mixed with the men's angry roars and cries of pain. The scene was chaotic. In the iron prison, Yun Shirshir was startled by the sound and slowly woke up. She slowly opened her eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. In her hazy vision, what she saw was a blur. She gritted her teeth and shook her head to force herself to be more awake. When the images gradually overlapped and became clear, she suddenly saw a child hanging in midair. A few men were surrounding him, punching, kicking, and whipping him fiercely. Yun Shirshir frowned. When she saw the child's handsome facial features stained with blood, she suddenly straightened up nervously and rushed forward. She felt a sharp pain in her wrist. Only then did she realize that she was still trapped in the iron prison. Her hands were chained, and she could not move. Xiao Yichen. Yun Shirshir recognized him at once. Seeing this scene, her eyes turned red, and she screamed in fear. Yichen! Yichen! Why is he here? Why is Xiao Yichen here? Yun Shirshir was so anxious that her eyes turned red. She struggled violently and shouted crazily, "Stop fighting! Stop hitting him! Stop fighting! Stop!" Upon hearing this, Mu Yichen was startled. He immediately loosened his grip and turned his head, only to see that Yun Shirshir was already awake in the iron prison. Her hands were constantly struggling, and her face was filled with worry and fear. "Mommy," he cried out, but before he could finish his sentence, a whip lashed out at his shoulder. Accompanied by the intense pain of his flesh being torn apart, he let out another muffled groan. Large beads of cold sweat slid down to the corners of his eyes, astringent and itchy. The man who had been bitten by him was finally freed. He fell to the ground and held his bleeding hand. His eyes widened in anger, and he cursed. He stood up and grabbed a whip from a person beside him and lashed it at the man fiercely. Mu Yichen let out a muffled groan. His face was tense as he endured the pain. When Yun Shirshir saw this scene, her heart seemed to be torn into pieces and dripping with blood. Although the whip did not land on her body, it was more painful than if it landed on her body. "Stop hitting him! Stop hitting him! You can hit me, but don't hit him! Stop!" Oh, what a strong mother-son relationship. The man laughed softly. His gaze fell on Yun Shirshir, seemingly harboring evil intentions. He lit a cigarette, held it in his mouth, and threw the whip on the ground. Pa! A sound was heard. The sound reverberated throughout the warehouse. Chapter 1172. Mu Yichen caught a glimpse of the man's cold gaze. His eyelids flickered, and an ominous feeling rose in his heart. When the man slowly walked toward Yun Shirshir, Mu Yichen said angrily, "What are you doing?" "Since she asked for it, I must let her have a taste of the whip." "Stop." Mu Yichen's face was cold. "You can hit me, but you're not allowed to touch my mommy. Mother and son love each other so much. Ha ha. Look, you bit me so hard. How am I going to settle this with you? Don't touch her. Mu Yichen's eyes were like torches. The sharpness in his eyes almost pierced through the man. The man was stunned. Even he was deeply shocked by this child's desire to protect his mother. This child was only 7 years old. Was he not afraid of pain? Was he not afraid of death? Was he still trying to be brave in this situation? When Yun Shirshir heard this, her heart ached even more. Even when she was tortured, she did not show any weakness on her face. In the end, a trace of grievance appeared on her face as she begged for mercy. Don't hit him. He's still a child, only 7 years old. If you continue to hit him, she did not dare to imagine. What was the limit of a child's endurance? However, a mother and son were connected. When the whip hit him, it hurt her heart. She would rather bear everything for him than watch her own child suffer. The man smiled sinisterly and walked toward Yun Shirshir. Mu Yichen said angrily, "Don't hit my mommy. Stop." The shutter door at the door slowly opened. The man was stunned. When he came back to his senses, he saw the scar-faced man walking in. He immediately hid the whip behind him and went to greet him. "Boss, why are you here? Didn't I tell you to rest well? We'll be on duty tonight." The scar-faced man glanced at him coldly. "Where is he?" "He's over there." The scar-faced man looked in the direction the man pointed. He saw Mu Yichen hanging high in the air, his body covered in blood. It was as if he had been fished out of a pool of blood. It was a terrible sight. He only took one look and was furious. He went forward and slapped the man to the ground. "Who told you to be so ruthless? Didn't I tell you not to torture him? He's so young. You didn't control your strength. What if you kill him?" The man was frightened by his expression. "Boss, do you know that if this child dies, you'll be buried with him, and you'll drag me down with you? You reckless dog, get out of here." The man was really frightened by his words, and his face turned ashen. "What are you waiting for? How many times do you want me to repeat myself?" "Boss, get out." "Yes, yes, yes, yes." Under the scar-faced man's cold shout, the man scrambled out. The scar-faced man walked up to Mu Yichen and glanced at the others. "You too, all of you." "Boss." The group of subordinates were so scared that they retreated while trembling. The heavy shutter door closed again. Mu Yichen opened his eyes weakly. In his blood-red vision, the man walked in front of him and looked at him at the same level. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but say nervously, "Don't torture him anymore. I beg you." The scar-faced man ignored her words. He looked up and down at Mu Yichen, who was being tortured, and asked expressionlessly, "Boy, does it hurt?" Mu Yichen snorted coldly. Obviously, he didn't care about him. Chapter 1173. The scar-faced man smiled. "You're so young, but you've got quite the backbone." In his heart, he quite admired this kid. He was actually able to endure so many hardships and did not admit defeat at all. "Know your place, okay? Don't move." The scar-faced man warned him and unlocked the shackles on his hands. Once his hands were released, Mu Yichen collapsed to the ground in exhaustion. He fell to the ground, but his hands were so numb that he couldn't even lift them, let alone resist. After a long period of confinement, his wrists were badly mutilated. The scar-faced man lifted him up, opened the iron cell, and gently threw him in. Yun Shirshir was stunned. This man didn't seem to be making things difficult for them. "You, shut up. Behave yourself." The scar-faced man walked over and unlocked one of the shackles on Yun Shirshir's hands. After being released, Yun Shirshir hurriedly hugged Xiao Yichen in her arms. She lowered her head to look at his face. Mu Yichen, who was in her arms, was already on the verge of death. After 4 hours of torture, he didn't even have the strength to hug Yun Shirshir. He only buried his face slightly in her arms and said softly, "Mommy, Mommy is here, Mommy is here." Mu Yichen lowered his eyes and murmured sadly, "Yichen couldn't protect Mommy. I'm sorry, Mommy." When Yun Shirshir heard this, she was so upset that her heart felt like it was being pricked by needles. Her hands trembled as she hugged him tightly. She was so sad that big drops of tears fell on Mu Yichen's face. Mu Yichen looked up and tried to reach out to wipe away her tears. He struggled for a while, but his efforts were futile and he could not exert any strength at all. He choked weakly, as if something was stuck in his throat. "Mommy, don't cry, okay?" Her tears fell on his face. The pain was worse than being whipped 100 times. Mu Yichen's plea made Yun Shirshir's heart ache even more. Why did he have to apologize to her? She should be the one to blame herself. She should be the one apologizing. She was the one who had implicated him. He had implicated this child and caused her to suffer so many unnecessary disasters. Yun Shirshir was in so much pain that her heart was about to be torn apart. She hugged Mu Yichen tightly, and tears kept falling from her eyes. She was heartbroken. Mu Yichen raised his trembling right hand and gently wrapped it around her waist, but he no longer had the strength to say a single word. The knife-scarred man locked the door and stood at the door. Looking at this scene, there was no change in his expression, but his heart was in turmoil. Anyone whose heart was made of flesh and blood would be moved by this scene. He didn't want to be honest. His heart was throbbing with pain because of this scene, not for any other reason. It was because, as a father, he also had a daughter. This scene undoubtedly pierced his heart. Yun Shirshir lowered her head and saw that Mu Yichen's body was covered in wounds. There was no unscathed skin on his body. There was really no unscathed skin on his body. There wasn't a single spot on his body that was unscathed. Or, rather, there were bloodstains all over his body. It was impossible to see how many wounds there were. Mu Yichen's face was already soaked in cold sweat. His eyes were stained with blood and sweat. It was a ghastly sight. Yun Shirshir's lips trembled. Every time she saw a wound, she felt her heart ache so much that she almost suffocated. "Do you have medicine for wounds?" Chapter 1174. The scar-faced man didn't say anything and turned to leave. She felt a wave of despair, as if she was in an ice cellar. That's right. In their eyes, she was now a criminal, a prisoner. Why should they fulfill her request? Yun Shirshir bit her lip hard. However, not long after, the scar-faced man walked over and threw a bottle of medicine and a roll of brand new gauze on her body. That's all. Apply some medicine for him. More or less, it was because there was still a trace of conscience in his heart that he couldn't just sit back and watch. Yun Shirshir had mixed feelings. No matter how this man treated them, at this moment, her impression of him seemed to have changed slightly. If it wasn't for him just now, she didn't know how those people would have tortured Xiao Yichen. However, Yun Shirshir didn't say anything. She quickly took the medicine and applied it on Mu Yichen. Perhaps it was because she only had one hand, but her movements were inevitably clumsy. The scar-faced man finally couldn't stand it anymore. He opened the door and walked in again to take the medicine from her hand. "Let me do it." As he spoke, he started to work. He was very familiar with the process. They were in the underworld, so naturally they often got injured. After a while, he finished treating the wounds on Mu Yichen's body. Perhaps he was too tired. Mu Yichen fell into a deep sleep in Yun Shirshir's arms. Yun Shirshir hugged him and caressed his cheeks with heartache. She maintained a tight hug and didn't move an inch. Hugging him gave her peace of mind. It was the same for Mu Yichen. Snuggling in his mommy's arms gave him the greatest peace of mind. However, what Yun Shirshir didn't know was that Mu Yichen had suffered so many injuries because he had provoked those people. At first, when he woke up from his coma, those men were surrounding the unconscious Yun Shirshir and rubbing their palms together. It was obvious that they couldn't suppress the restlessness in their hearts and wanted to do something bad to her. Mu Yichen didn't know what they were trying to do, but he didn't want to see those people's dirty hands touch his mommy. Therefore, in his anxiety, he shouted loudly to stop them. He shouted at the top of his lungs, but those men acted as if they didn't hear him and started to touch Yun Shirshir. Seeing this, Mu Yichen was so anxious that his blood rushed to his heart. He disregarded everything to humiliate and provoke them. He used all the vicious words he could think of to curse them. He had received a good upbringing from a young age. He had always been an elegant gentleman. However, this was the first time he had used the most vicious words to insult someone. It was all for the sake of protecting Mommy and not letting their dirty hands touch her. In the end, he managed to infuriate them. They beat and kicked him in a frenzy, handcuffed him, hung him up, whipped him, and subjected him to all sorts of horrible tortures. There was even a lunatic who stuck a needle between his fingers, but he endured all of it, even if he was in excruciating pain, to the extent that he fainted. He didn't beg for mercy at all. That was because he was so stubborn and strong in his bones. How could he tolerate himself lowering his head to these motley crew? He even tolerated himself begging for mercy in a submissive manner. He secretly regretted that when he faced Mu Wanru because of a moment of soft-heartedness, he cared about their past relationship and didn't kill her. In fact, he didn't have a strong sense of kinship towards Mu Wanru. However, Mu Wanru did treat him well. Chapter 1175. It was impossible to say that he had no feelings for her at all. It was just that at such a young age, he had seen such a bloody truth. Mu Yichen's heart was also in pain, and he found it hard to accept. He could not believe that Mu Wanru, who usually looked gentle, was actually one of the masterminds behind this incident. He also did not expect that she would be able to harm his great-grandfather. How much did his great-grandfather dote on her? He treated her like a treasure in his heart, afraid that she would fall in his hands and melt in his mouth. She actually poisoned his medicine bowl. How cruel was her heart! In his innocent world, he had never thought that a person's heart could be so vicious. What made him even more regretful was that all these years he had actually acknowledged the thief as his mother. For a moment, he could not forgive himself. He also felt a lot of guilt towards Yun Shirshir in his heart. The scar-faced man brought a bowl of plain porridge and handed it to the iron cell. "Feed him," he said, but there was no expression on his face. Yun Shirshir looked at him warily. Finally, her gaze fell on the bowl of porridge again, and her eyes were full of suspicion. The scar-faced man seemed to have seen through her suspicion and said coldly, "Don't worry, it's not poisoned." "Why?" Yun Shirshir frowned and became even more suspicious. The friendliness displayed by this scarred man made her feel a little wary. The scar-faced man snorted coldly, but did not say anything. This bowl of porridge was cooked by his subordinate and given to him. He did not drink it himself and gave it to Yun Shirshir. He sat down on the chair again, lit a cigarette, and smoked it. After a while, he said, "Feed him. Otherwise, it's going to turn cold." Yun Shirshir pursed her lips, took the bowl of porridge with one hand, and ate a mouthful first. After waiting for a while, when she did not feel any discomfort, she scooped a mouthful, helped Mu Yichen up with difficulty, and fed him a mouthful. Mu Yichen was half-conscious and did not even have the strength to open his mouth. Yun Shirshir swallowed a mouthful of porridge and slowly placed it beside his lips, passing the porridge into his mouth. gulp, a mouthful of warm porridge slid down his throat, and only then did he feel his body warm up slightly. "Mommy." Mu Yichen's throat moved as he called out in an obscure voice. "Yes, Mommy is here." "Xiao Yichen, Mommy will feed you porridge, okay?" Mu Yichen struggled to open his eyes wider. "Mommy, do your wounds still hurt?" he asked anxiously and impatiently. Yun Shishir shook her head and suppressed her uneasiness and sadness. "Yichen, be good. Mommy doesn't feel pain. Mommy doesn't feel pain. Mommy, I'm a little cold." The loss of blood caused his body temperature to drop. Her heart immediately ached for him, and she hugged him even tighter. "Are you still cold?" It's a little cold." Xiao Yichen was trembling in her arms. The basement was cold and damp. Coupled with the fact that he had lost a lot of blood, his hands and feet started to turn cold. Yun Shishir was so anxious that she did not know what to do. The scar-faced man pursed his lips and suddenly threw the cigarette on the ground. He stepped on it fiercely, walked forward, and threw his jacket into the basement. Yun Shishir immediately took it and covered him with it. The jacket was very thick. It was a long trench coat. After Yun Shishir wrapped the trench coat around him, Mu Yichen's expression softened a little. Thus, Yun Shishir continued to feed him a bowl of porridge. Mu Yichen obediently finished the entire bowl of porridge, and only then did his body temperature recover a little. Chapter 1176. Yun Tianyu's men sent a reply, saying that they had failed to find anything. Before this, Yun Tianyu had used some dark technology to simulate a satellite map based on Xiao Yichen's location information and narrow down the search area. Yun Tianyu's heaven-defying technology had to be mentioned here. Previously, Yun Shishir had bought a pair of watches for Mu Yichen and Yun Tianyu. These were smartwatches developed by Liji Holdings. Not mentioning other functions, just the positioning function of this watch was heaven-defying. It could be said that no matter how advanced today's satellite positioning was, there were still some remote areas that were not covered by GPS in such a big place. Even if there was coverage, the signal would be weak. Once underground, it was basically impossible for the GPS signal to pinpoint the location accurately. It could, at most, maintain a range of 1,000 meters. However, the GPS smart chip installed in this watch could, through remote control, enhance the signal radiation and pinpoint the location to a range of 100 meters. A range of 100 meters was a heaven-defying data that would leave one speechless. Liji Holdings was probably the only company in the world that had this technology. Yun Tianyu used remote control to enhance Mu Yichen's weak GPS signal and pinpoint it to a range of 100 meters. He then sent people to follow him. In the end, they found the signal point on a deserted mountain road. It was a blood-stained watch. The men he sent out returned with the watch and handed it to him. Yun Tianyu took a look at it and could not help but shudder with fear. This was Mu Yichen's watch. There were some shocking bloodstains on it, and it seemed to have been run over by a car. It was already broken. Yun Tianyu held the watch tightly in his hand. A trace of worry surfaced in his heart. It gave him an ominous feeling. It seemed that the other party had taken precautions and did not let go of even the smallest watch on Mu Yichen's body. Perhaps they realized that this watch had a GPS function, so they threw it away to prevent it from being tracked. It seemed that this group of people was very cautious. This time, the last bit of information was like a stone sinking into the sea. Gong Jia sat in front of the sofa and looked at Yun Tianyu, who was holding the watch tightly in his hand, in deep thought. "The trail is broken?" "Yes." Yun Tianyu placed the watch on the table, calmed himself down, and slowly said, "What I can confirm is that they're still alive." "Oh, how can you be so sure?" "I'm guessing that they kidnapped Mommy and brother for a reason. The mastermind behind the scenes had yet to surface, and there was no movement. They were biding their time and only sent these photos, probably to intimidate them. Or perhaps it's to anger Daddy. Then can you guess what the purpose of those people is? He looked up and narrowed his eyes slightly. I'm guessing it was to threaten Daddy. Daddy must have something very important in his hands. Yun Tianyu expressionlessly replied. Right now, the only way to stabilize the situation is to stay calm. Gong Jie was secretly shocked. She was shocked by his calmness and calmness. It was obvious that when Yu saw the photo, he was furious and anxious. However, he quickly calmed himself down. Chapter 1177. Yun Tianyu pondered for a while before finally picking up his phone. He originally wanted to rely on his own ability to save his mother and brother. He was confident and even a little conceited. He thought that it was enough to rely on his own ability. However, after careful consideration, he finally decided to join forces with Mu Yaja. It was not because of anything else other than the fact that all the clues had been cut off, and he was now in deep trouble. Thus, he could only find a breakthrough through his daddy. He would not let go of any chance. He dialed Mu Yaja's number. The call was quickly connected. Yu. Mu Yaja was slightly surprised to receive Yu's call, but at the same time, his heart was slightly relieved. Yu being safe and sound was a blessing in disguise. Daddy, where are you now? I'll go and find you. I'll send someone to pick you up. No need. Don't worry, I'll be fine. Yu reassured him. After putting down the phone, Gong Jie, who was behind him, suddenly narrowed his eyes. Yu, who is your daddy? Yu turned around and furrowed his brows in puzzlement. What's wrong? I just want to know more. Oh, Yun Tianyu raised a brow and did not hide anything from him. Mu Yaja. Gong Jie's expression changed slightly, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Who? Disheng Financial Group's CEO, Mu Yaja. Just as Yu finished speaking, Gong Jie's expression turned even colder. It was so cold that it made one shudder. Yu glanced at his strange expression and asked suspiciously, What's wrong? You know my daddy? He. Gong Jie sneered, his gaze as cold as a knife. It was more than just knowing him. The Gongs and the Mews had an irreconcilable feud. Fire and water were incompatible. Is the head of the Mu family the one called Mu Sheng? He asked out of the blue. Yu hummed in acknowledgement. Gong Jie lazily leaned against the sofa, his lips curling into a cold smile. Why? Is that old man still alive? He's not dead yet. He's really tough. Gong Jie suddenly snorted. Of course, it's good that he's still alive. What do you mean? You caught a glimpse of the old man's eyes. You seem to hate him? Of course. Up. He wanted to taste the feeling of living a life worse than death. Gong Jie was infuriated. If it wasn't for this old thing, how could he have caused his mother to die for no apparent reason? If not for him, his sister's whereabouts would not be unknown. Gong Jie hated Mu Sheng to the core. He did not expect that old thing to still be alive after so many years. His life was really tough. You asked, What's the matter? Tell me about it. Gong Jie glanced at him and said, You don't need to know. This has nothing to do with you. How can it have nothing to do with me? This is a matter between the Gongs and the Mews, so it has something to do with me. Don't tell me you're trying to stop me? He asked coldly. Why should I stop you? You smiled disapprovingly. I have nothing to do with him. He hated Mu Sheng, too. Chapter 1178. He was already so old, yet he had caused so much harm. This matter has nothing to do with you. Gong Jie paused for a moment before his brows furrowed. I just didn't expect you to be related to Mu Yaja. He's my daddy. This is going to be tricky. Gong Jia smiled nonchalantly, but his eyes were filled with ruthlessness. Little Yu, what should we do? The two families are like fire and water. Sooner or later, I'll trample the Muse under my feet. Whatever the Muse owe me, I'll make them pay with their blood. Gong Jia's voice was cold beyond compare. Closing his eyes, he could still recall the despairing scene of his youth. He watched helplessly as his mother died in a sea of fire. He watched helplessly as the fire spread. He tried his best to rush into the fire, but he was stopped dead in his tracks. If not for Mu Sheng's men chasing after him, that accident would not have happened. His mother would not have left him. Even now, this matter was a thorn in his heart that could not be removed. This deep hatred was deeply rooted. It was a nightmare that could not be erased even after so many years. The coldness in Gong Jia's words made even Yu Yu's heart tremble. I don't care what you do to the Muse, but I have to tell you where I stand. Yu Yu paused and narrowed his eyes slightly. Mu Yaja is my daddy. I won't let you touch him. His tone was firm and brooked no argument. There was even a hint of threat in it. Gong Jia was slightly startled when he heard that. Yu Yu crossed his arms and said expressionlessly, "You can kill or torture that Mu Sheng as you wish. It has nothing to do with me. But you can't touch Mu Yaja." His tone was equally domineering, as if he was declaring his stand to Gong Jia. Even when facing Mu Yaja, he was stubborn, unwilling to admit defeat, and even disdainful of him. However, when it came to his father's interests, he would definitely do his best to protect him without hesitation. Why? Gong Jia raised his eyebrows. Yu Yu smiled elegantly like an arrogant gentleman and said, casually, "No reason. No means no." Gong Jia suddenly stood up and walked in front of him. He squatted down in front of him and calmly looked into his beautiful eyes. One big and one small, the two stared at each other as if they were in a silent confrontation. Yu Yu looked at him with an elegant smile. Gong Jia smiled. "Are you going to defend him to the end?" Yes. Mu Yaja was his daddy. He was also the man his mother loved deeply. More importantly, they were his family. No matter what happened, he would always stand by his father's side. This position would never change because of anything. But what should we do? Gong Jia seemed a little annoyed. He raised his eyebrows indifferently. "Even if it's for your sake, I can't do it." Yu was slightly stunned, but his smile did not diminish. Gong Jia said coldly, Yu, it's your business to defend your father. What I do is my business. We won't interfere with each other's business. Okay? I want to see what you're capable of to go against the Gong family for him." Gong Jia smiled, but his eyes were unusually cold. "It's not just for him. You said casually. It was for his mother." "Okay, then let's wait and see." Gong Jia said, stood up, and walked away. Yu watched his back as he left. His eyes narrowed. What kind of deep hatred did the Gong and Mu families have for each other? Chapter 1179. This matter was really tricky. This daddy of his was really a worrisome one. Disheng Financial Group's CEO's office. Mu Yaja stood by the window and looked out with his deep eyes. It was already late at night, and the city was filled with neon lights. The ashtray on the table was filled with cigarette butts. He was not addicted to smoking, but today he smoked a whole pack of cigarettes like a madman. It was as if this was the only way to calm him down. He was waiting. He was waiting patiently. The more his father provoked him and drove him crazy, the calmer he had to be. In this aspect, the father and son were very similar. They both knew that the only way to deal with the current situation was to be calm. Yun Tianyu soon arrived at Disheng. He knocked on the door to the CEO's office. After instructing Lisa to guard the door, he walked in and saw Mu Yaja standing expressionlessly by the window. He turned around when he heard the commotion. His cold gaze softened slightly when he saw him. "Daddy!" Yu greeted him with an obedient smile. Mu Yaja walked over and picked up the boy, hugging him tightly in his arms. "Good boy." It was good that he was fine. Mu Yaja did not say a word and only hugged him tightly. However, Yu, who was leaning into his embrace, could clearly feel how fierce his father's hug was. He used so much strength that it hurt him a little. However, this time, Yu did not push him away. His small hands slowly wrapped around his shoulders and gently stroked his silky hair. He understood his daddy's state of mind. He knew that no matter how strong a man was, there would be times when he was weak. Even if his daddy did not show that kind of weakness, Yu could acutely sense his faint uneasiness and guilt. Deep guilt. It was probably because, as a man, he had failed to protect his family and was blaming himself. Mu Yaja hugged him and said above his head, "Yu, I'm sorry." Daddy couldn't protect you. I'm sorry." He had always been a man as arrogant as an emperor. To him, the words, "I'm sorry," were condescending, and he would never say it out loud. But now, the guilt in his heart overflowed, especially when he saw the photo of Yun Shir and Xiao Chen in a sorry state. One of them was his woman. One was his son. Because of him, he suffered an undeserved calamity. He had always prided himself on his foresight and always had the overall situation in his hands. But now, his weakness had been ruthlessly grasped by someone. It was as if someone was strangling his throat, and he was about to suffocate. Yu raised her eyebrows and suddenly asked in a deep voice, "Why are you apologizing?" His voice was still childish, but it was extremely steady. Mu Yaja was stunned. You asked seriously, "Daddy, are you a god?" Mu Yaja furrowed his eyebrows. He did not understand why he asked this. Yu raised his head and looked at him seriously. His lips curved slightly. "Are you a god?" "No, you're not." Chapter 1180. If that's the case, I will never forgive you even if you apologize 1,000 or 10,000 times. Mu Yaja's eyes flashed with shock. He did not expect such words to come out of his mouth. In his eyes, Yu was mature, steady, and wise. However, he did not expect him to be so mature. While he was in a daze, Yu smiled again. "But you are not a god. You can't be a clairvoyant and predict all of this. You can't save mommy and brother from the abyss of suffering the moment it happened. You can't, and I can't either. So, what right do I have to blame you?" "Blame you? You have no right to blame yourself." After a pause, Yu's eyes deepened. "So, you don't have to apologize." Mu Yaja smiled and could not help but pinch his cheeks. Yu grabbed his hand all of a sudden, and his beautiful eyes flashed with a bright luster. "But, Daddy, I want to ask you something." "Do you have anyone in mind?" Mu Yaja's eyes narrowed. Yu asked, "Have you ever wondered who kidnapped mommy and brother? You probably have a suspect in mind, right?" Mu Yaja was silent for a while. Then he suddenly said, "Yes." "In that case, can you guess why they're doing this?" Mu Yaja and Yu looked at each other. Then he slowly got up and walked to the window. Dishing Tower was tall and majestic. The CEO's office was located on the highest floor of Dishing Tower. Standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looking out of the window, one would feel proud of the world. It was like an emperor in ancient times standing on the highest tower and looking down on the world. At the same time, one suddenly understood what it felt like to be lonely at the top. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes and said slowly, "They probably want the Mu Empire in my hands." "I guessed as much." Yu smiled and said, Daddy, you have the biggest share of Mu Group's shares in your hands. Naturally, some people will not be able to hold themselves back. If you don't act now, I'm afraid you won't have the chance anymore. So, I'm guessing that they're also after the shares of Mu Group. Yaja smiled in relief. Smart, as expected of his son. Yu did not smile. Just as he had expected, the mastermind had kidnapped his mommy and Mui Chen to threaten his daddy to hand over the shares of Mu Group. Mu Group's shares. What a tempting thing it was. If he had Mu Yaja's shares in Mu Group, it would mean that he would become the sole owner of the vast Mu Group, and his power would be earth-shattering. The internal structure of the Mu family was deeply intertwined. As one grew, the other declined. There had always been endless disputes and intrigues. It was comparable to the ancient times when the imperial power was replaced. They didn't even hesitate to turn against each other and kill each other. Sometimes, in the face of benefits, perhaps some emotions would become much weaker. Selfishness was the deep-rooted bad habit of most people. Moreover, as a member of a wealthy family, there were many things that he had no choice but to do. Yu suddenly turned and fixed his gaze on Mu Yaja's face. He asked calmly, "Then, if that person threatened you to hand over the shares of Mu Group, what would you do?" This was an extremely sharp question. Yu went straight to the point. He did not allow Mu Yaja to avoid the question. He was eager to get an answer from his daddy. Chapter 1181. He did not doubt the importance of his mother in his father's heart. Yu cared a lot about his attitude. He did not care that if his father gave up the Mu Group shares, he might really lose everything and be all alone. What he cared more about was how far this man could go for his mommy. This was because even he could not be sure if this man, who had always been like a king, would make such a choice between power and a woman. Would he choose his mother without hesitation? Yu stared at his face without blinking. Mu Yaja lowered his head and looked at him. After a long silence, he suddenly smiled. "Do you still need to ask this question?" He smiled casually and spoke casually. However, Yu was shocked. He was even more curious about why his father would give him such an answer. Mu Yaja knew the doubts in this child's heart. He smiled faintly, but his expression was very calm. "Without me, the Mu Group will only be a pile of ruins. This empire is strong because of me, but it will also collapse because of me." He paused and smiled faintly. However, his smile could not hide his conceit. "But without the Mu Group, I won't lose everything." Yu held his breath. This answer was within his expectations, but it was also unexpected. Mu Yaja said, "Just as you said, whether it's power or wealth, if I can't even protect my beloved family, then I don't need it. It's fine. So, if it really comes to that, will you give up the Mu Group for Mommy?" "I will." Just as Mu Yaja finished speaking, the door was kicked open fiercely. "Bastard!" Mu Yaja and Yu were stunned. They turned around and saw Mu Linfeng striding in with a furious expression on his face. Mu Linfeng had been standing outside the door for a long time and had heard much of their conversation. However, he had obviously heard that sentence. This brat was willing to ruin the Mu family's empire for a woman. He flew into a rage and roared, "I won't allow you to do that." "Second uncle?" Mu Yaja was surprised. Why did he come back? Mu Linfeng's probing gaze landed on him. His eagle-like gaze was filled with disappointment and disbelief. If he had not heard it with his own ears, he would never have believed that Mu Yaja would willingly give up his shares of Mu Group for a woman. This answer caused him to be greatly disappointed, and even more so, he was unable to restrain his rage. Was this brat really bewitched by that demon? He walked in front of Mu Yaja and sat down on the sofa. As he breathed heavily, he looked at him with a scowl. "I order you to sever all ties with that woman. Right now." His attitude was commanding in nature, and there was no room for resistance. His tone was urgent, and there was no room for delay. Muyaja's heart sank. His face was as cold as ice as he said coldly, "Impossible." This was clearly contradicting him. Even if the person sitting in front of him was his second uncle, the powerful second Master Mu of the Mu family, and the elder he had always respected from the bottom of his heart, Mu Linfeng was shocked by his icy tone. Then he glared at him and glared at him. "Are you talking back to me?" "No. How would I dare to contradict you?" Chapter 1182. Mu Yaja retorted, "She's my woman, and I'm her man. Second uncle, please don't meddle in our affairs." Mu Linfeng was flabbergasted. Mu Yaja's attitude was firm, and there was no room for discussion. He did not wish for anyone to interfere in his private affairs. Mu Linfeng became even angrier at her words. "I don't care what your attitude is, but you're not allowed to make a decision on this matter. Yaja, this isn't like you. Second uncle has high hopes for you. You shouldn't ruin the Mu group's future just because of some so-called grudge between a man and a woman. I think you're getting more and more muddle-headed. Where did the shrewd you go? What kind of magic does that woman have to make you so bewitched that you're even willing to give up the Mu group's shares for her sake? Do you know what this means? It means that all our hard work over the years has gone down the drain, and we've given it to someone else. I single-handedly made you the successor of the Mu family and handed over the Mu group to you. I didn't let you mess around like this. I think that woman is a femme fatale. I order you to sever all ties with her. Don't lose sight of the big picture for the small. You'll regret it sooner or later." As soon as he said that, a layer of frost appeared on his face. Just as he was about to speak, Mu Yaja pressed on his shoulder. He looked up and said expressionlessly, "Second uncle, don't worry. I know what I'm doing." "You know what you're doing?" Mu Linfeng was so angry that he laughed. "What do you mean by that? Do you mean that you're giving away all my hard work? Do you mean that you're willing to give up the Mu group for a woman with an unknown identity? I think you're trying to anger me to death." "I wouldn't dare." Mu Yaja replied respectfully, "Second uncle, you're being too harsh." Mu Linfeng was furious. "Haha, you wouldn't dare? What's there to be afraid of? I think you have a lot of guts. Do you know what the consequences of your actions will be? The Mu family is the core of the country's economy, the heart. Every branch of the family is connected to the heart. Even if it's not me, the country's higher-ups won't just sit by and watch. I think you've been blinded. Where did your previous shrewdness and wisdom go? There are some relationships that are dangerous for you. You have to be decisive. Don't be indecisive. With me here, I won't allow you to mess around." Mu Yaja's face suddenly turned cold. Mu Linfeng caught his icy expression. Mu Linfeng was even angrier when he saw this. "Why are you giving me such a look? I don't mean anything else." Mu Yaja said coldly, "Second uncle, once upon a time, I thought the same as you. In my eyes, love and hatred were like child's play. In the past, he was indifferent to relationships. He didn't believe that there was such a thing as true love that could disregard power and wealth in this world. Does true love really exist? Women, to him, were dispensable. He was so cold that there was even a rumor that he had a hidden illness and couldn't do it. Ha ha. However, until Yun Shirshir appeared. She taught him what true love was. She also taught him how to love someone with his heart. Chapter 1183. When he was young, he was full of ambition. To him, life was perhaps only as simple as revenge and survival. He put all his weight into fighting for power and scheming against each other. No matter what orders Mu Linfeng gave him, he had always followed them step by step without any rebellious thoughts. Now, however, There was warmth and weight in his heart. There was also someone he cared about. Yun Shirshir was the woman he was willing to love with his life. For her, he was not afraid, even if he had to give up his life. Why would he be afraid of losing everything? At this thought, Mu Yaja's lips curled up. But now, I don't think so anymore. Second uncle, she's my family, not some dirty woman you're talking about. Ha ha, family? Don't tell me that this so-called family member of yours is more important than me? Mu Linfeng laughed, his expression furious. I don't care who she is. You must listen to my orders on this matter. Cut off all ties with her, and don't have any contact with her anymore. If you ask me, she's the reincarnation of a vixen who has bewitched your heart. In ancient times, the extravagant King Zhou was also bewitched by a vixen possessed by Daji. He didn't even care about the imperial court. There was also King Yu of Zhou, who teased his vassals with a fire beacon just for Bao Si's sake. Since ancient times, this woman has been a dangerous thing. I'm not forbidding you from touching women, but I'm warning you not to be like those incapable emperors in ancient times and give up your country for a woman. You've always been shrewd and principled. What you've said today has really disappointed me. These words were a little too harsh. Mu Yaja pursed his lips tightly. His handsome face tensed up and a trace of anger appeared on his face. If the person sitting in front of him was not an elder who had promoted him single-handedly and whom he respected, he would have flipped the table in anger and told him to scram. Second uncle, I hope you know that Yun Shirshir isn't that kind of woman. Mu Linfeng snorted and said stubbornly, I think she's that kind of woman. She's a femme fatale. She's a scourge and a ticking time bomb if she stays by your side. I've miscalculated. I should have gotten rid of her the day I found out about her. In fact, she did have the ability to harm people. You must know that in the past, you knew how to consider the big picture. You would never lose your sense of propriety because of a woman. Mu Linfeng's expression was dignified, and his eyes were cold. Yu was enraged when he heard that. If it wasn't for Mu Yaja, he would have slammed the table with this stubborn old man. How dare he say that his mommy is a femme fatale and the reincarnation of a demon? Since when did a person's beauty become a sin? Yu was still angry, but he didn't say anything. Since Daddy had stopped him, he must have his reasons. He didn't say anything because he respected his daddy's decision. Mu Yaja's face turned even colder. He had to admit that whenever it involved Yun Shirshir, he would always lose his sense of propriety, because in his heart she was special. He suddenly said coldly, ability also means that you need to take responsibility. That's the responsibility and principle that a man should have. If I have to sacrifice the person I love just to consider the big picture, then I don't want this country. So be it. Yu was stunned. He applauded his daddy's words in his heart. That's right. That's what he should say. Chapter 1184. If he had to sacrifice his beloved for the sake of power and wealth, that was simply ridiculous. Mu Linfeng was completely enraged. He slammed the table and stood up. How dare you? Take back what you just said. No. Mu Linfeng was even more exasperated. He frowned and spat coldly. I think you've really lost your mind. Bastard, you're simply a bastard. Are you out of your mind? Second uncle is so disappointed in you. Mu Yaja looked up and met his gaze expressionlessly. Ha! I'm sorry to disappoint second uncle. However, I'm also very disappointed in you. Mu Linfeng's face turned pale with anger. His facial muscles twitched from excessive anger. The cold glint in his eyes was like a sharp sword that could not wait to pierce through him. Remember this. Now that things have come to this, the Mu group isn't just your blood and sweat. At the same time, it's my blood and sweat. Second uncle, will never allow you to trample on my blood and sweat like this." With that, he turned around abruptly and slammed the door as he left. Bang! The sound was earth-shattering. The huge office seemed to be shaking. Muyaja slowly shut his eyes and sucked in a deep breath of cold air. You suddenly hooked his arm around his shoulder. "Daddy, good job. But don't worry. Even if you don't have the Mu group, you still have me, Mommy, and Xiaoyi Chen. We're a family, and we'll go through thick and thin together." Muyaja scratched the bridge of his nose, but his expression was grave. "That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what is it? Have you ever thought that even if I hand over the Mu group, will that person really hand over the person?" The smile on Yu's face faded, and his eyes turned cold. "That person? That means you already have a suspect. I think I know who he is." This person was probably the big fish that he had been waiting for all this time, the real culprit behind his mother's death. Ha! After so many years, they were still using such despicable methods. According to the news from the hospital, Grandpa was poisoned. If he hadn't been sent to the hospital in time, his life would have been in danger. And he was no stranger to this method. Back then, his mother had also been poisoned by someone and had been murdered. It was said that the poison in his grandfather's medicine was industrial sodium nitrite. It was a slow-acting poison. If a dose of 0.1 grams was added to the medicine every day, the patient would be poisoned and fall into a coma. In the end, the patient would go into shock and die. As for sodium nitrite, this term was not unfamiliar to him. His mother had also passed away due to sodium nitrite poisoning. After his mother passed away, he had no one to rely on in the Mu residence. For a period of time, he would only take a bite of each dish. The bowls and chopsticks used were all made of silver. Later on, Mu Linfeng took her in. Muyaja walked to his desk, but his phone suddenly rang. "Chairman Mu, old Master Mu has passed the critical stage." At the Mu Group's private hospital, Muyaja and Yu rushed to the hospital. However, when the father and son entered the ward, Muyaja's expression suddenly froze when he saw the silent man sitting by the bed. Yu saw his strange expression and could not help but look at the middle-aged man. Chapter 1185. He said in a deep voice, "Yaja, you're here." Muyaja looked puzzled. "Fourth uncle, why are you here?" "I'm here to visit your grandpa. Have a seat." Yu could not help holding Muyaja's hand tightly. Muyaja hugged him to his side and walked to the other side of the bed. He sat down and looked up to face his father. What followed was a long period of dead silence. Finally, it was the man who broke the silence. "Your grandpa's health is deteriorating." Muyaja's brows were knitted tightly from start to finish. His face was cold. He glanced at his face and suddenly smiled. "What's wrong? You seem to have something on your mind." "No." "Oh." Mu Lianjue gave another sinister smile as his gaze fell on the old man's pale face. Then there was another long period of silence. It was as if a century had passed. He suddenly said, "Yaja, I think you have something to say to me, don't you?" Upon hearing this, Yu narrowed his eyes warily and raised his head to look at Muyaja, only to see the latter's deep gaze on him. It was as if a sharp sword was piercing through him. He composed himself and keenly noticed the slight change in Muyaja's expression. He abruptly turned his head and looked at the man with a sharp gaze. The atmosphere in the room was very delicate. Muyaja suddenly asked coldly, "Fourth uncle, how did you know that Grandpa's health has deteriorated?" "I only found out when the Mu family sent me the news." He. Muyaja went straight to the point. "Where is he?" Mu Lianjue frowned and looked at him suspiciously. "Yaja, what do you mean by this? I'm asking you." Muyaja's eyes glinted dangerously and chillingly. Where is he? Yu was startled and then looked at him suspiciously. Could it be? It's him. Mu Lianjue looked at Mu Yaja expressionlessly. He did not even look at Mu Yaja in the eye as he calmly leaned on his cane. I don't know what you're talking about. You understand. Mu Yaja leaned forward abruptly and grabbed Mu Lianjue's collar. Raising his hand, a pistol appeared in it. Abruptly, he pressed the muzzle of the gun against his forehead. Kacha, the cold and mechanical sound of the gun being loaded rang out, and the pitch-black muzzle continuously emitted cold air. Where are they? He. Mu Lianjue let the man grab him by the collar and let out a chilling laugh. Then he burst into uncontrollable laughter. Ha ha! Mu Yaja looked at him expressionlessly, without a change in his expression. Yaja, it's not like you to be so angry. Mu Lianjue looked up with blatant provocation. Are you trying to scare me? He. It's not like you don't know the consequences of shooting me. If I die, you'll have to collect my corpse, won't you? Ha ha ha. So where are they? Mu Yaja lost his patience. Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly. Don't be anxious. I know what you want, and at the same time, you should know what I want too. You stood up nervously all of a sudden. Could it be that Mommy and Xiaoi Chen are really in his hands? Mu Yaja's lips were cold as he pushed the man away with the gun. Mu Lianjue lost his balance and almost fell to the ground. Chapter 1186. The sudden commotion in the ward attracted the attention of Lisa, who was guarding outside the door. She pushed the door open and entered. Looking at the tense atmosphere in the ward, she could not help narrowing her eyes as her hand subconsciously reached for the holster on her waist. Yu swept a glance at her. She immediately walked to his side. Her expression was cold, and she did not say a word. Mu Lianjue casually ordered, "Sit down." Mu Yaja's expression remained unchanged, but his eyes were cold. Mu Lianjue raised his head to look at him, but his voice suddenly froze. Sit down. It was clear that he wanted to negotiate with him. Mu Yaja smirked and expressionlessly returned to his seat, no matter how hard he tried to restrain himself. However, his hands were still trembling uncontrollably. It was this man, the culprit who caused his mother's death. He narrowed his eyes dangerously. Back then, my mother's poisoning incident was also your doing? He. Mu Lianjue snorted, but his face did not change much. He calmly glanced at him from the corner of his eyes and cruelly spat out 2 words. That's right. Mu Yaja's face instantly tensed up like an ice house, freezing everything within 10,000 feet. However, the man's next words almost made him lose control of his anger. It's not just your mother. Your father's car accident back then was also my doing. Hearing this, Mu Yaja's eyes turned sharp. He abruptly raised his head and stared at the other with a chilling gaze. Almost gritting his teeth, he questioned, "What did you say?" "What? Are you very surprised?" "You should have heard what I said earlier very clearly." Mu Lianjue, however, did not show any fear on his face. Instead, he asked nonchalantly, "What? Do you really think that your father's car accident back then was purely an accident?" Mu Yaja's shoulders trembled slightly when he heard this. He closed his eyes deeply. When he was young, his father had a car accident and fell off a cliff, resulting in his death. It was not that he did not suspect that this car accident was an accident or a conspiracy. However, there wasn't much evidence. According to the autopsy report, his father was suspected to have been poisoned. His pupils were extremely constricted, and respiratory paralysis was the main cause of his death. He suspected that it was a hallucination caused by excessive drug use, which then led to sudden shock, which led to sudden death. Therefore, the car accident was not the main cause of death. These reports were obtained from his investigations after he became an adult. At that time, he couldn't help but be suspicious. His father did not seem to have a history of taking drugs when he was alive. This car accident was indeed very suspicious and very strange. However, the report stated that it was only a suspicion, and there was not enough evidence to show that it was due to excessive drug use that led to shock. He didn't expect that his father's death was also his doing. Mu Yaja was nearly paralyzed by anger. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the gun, raised his hand, and aimed at him. His fingers trembled as he pulled the trigger. His eyes were completely bloodshot. Despite being pointed at by the gun, Mu Lianjue's face remained calm. It was as if he was certain that the man would not shoot him dead. You don't have to bluff. I know you won't shoot. Mu Yaja clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. His handsome face was ghastly pale. Chapter 1187. Mu Lianjue looked at the unconscious man on the bed with a vicious gaze. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't have to go through all this trouble to pass the Mu family's head position to Mu Lianqing. Shut up, Mu Yaja bellowed. Even the unconscious Mu Sheng seemed to be shocked by his anger. His eyelashes twitched violently, but he still showed no signs of waking up. These aren't excuses. Excuses? What excuses? Mu Lianjue stood up angrily. His pair of eagle-like eyes glared at him as he pointed at Mu Sheng with a sinister expression. Back then, he personally promised me that I'm the true heir of the Mu family. What happened in the end? What happened in the end? In the end, just because I'm a concubine's son, that old thing actually went back on his word and chose Mu Lianqing as his heir. Why? Is it because Mu Lianqing and Jiang Yishan have a marriage alliance and are relying on the Jiang family's power? Or is it because he's the son of the main wife and has a noble status while I, a concubine's son, deserve to be looked down upon? Mu Lianjue's face burned with fury as he spoke. His voice was thunderous as if it had exploded. In terms of ability and means, how am I inferior to Mu Lianqing? I'm clearly more outstanding than him and more qualified to be his heir. Just because I'm a concubine's son, all the hard work I've put in is being slandered by these two words so easily. On what basis? I want to ask you, on what basis? So, you murdered my father. Mu Yaja's emotions gradually calmed down. He quickly calmed down and looked at him coldly. Yes, Mu Lianjue gritted his teeth. His facial muscles trembled due to his excessive anger. Why did you do that? Mu Yaja questioned coldly. My father has always been aloof from worldly affairs. As long as you say the word, he'll give up the family head position. Give up. Mu Lianjue laughed in anger, his eyes cold. Give up. What does he think I am? Does he think I'm a beggar? A beggar? Does he think I'm so pitiful that I need his pity and charity? I don't need him to give it up to me. That's because the Mu family's inheritance rights should belong to me. Mu Yaja was silent. Mu Lianjue suddenly laughed sinisterly. Do you know how it feels? What right does Mu Lianqing have to effortlessly obtain the things that I've used all my strength to fight for? Why is it that the things I value as much as my life are as light as a feather in his eyes? Is he mocking me? Mu Lianjue's heart sank completely as he bellowed. I don't need his charity or pity. He snatched what was mine and still didn't care about it. Isn't this a great humiliation to me? Hati. What? Mu. Tsest? What? What? SSS. What right? T. Est. S's. S to. Ts. SSSS. S. Mu's. Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly. Yaja, if you want to blame someone, don't blame me for being ruthless. It's this muddle-headed old thing's fault. Since he wants to do this, then I'll let him have a taste of the pain of losing the one he loves. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. Chapter 1188. Back then, Mu Lianjue had already been listed as one of his suspects. It was not because of anything else. From the analysis of Mu Wanru's fake DNA report, only Mu Lianjue had the ability to do so, to be able to do it cleanly without leaving any traces behind. You were the one who tampered with Mu Wanru's DNA report, too. Mu Yaja said in a low voice. However, this was not a question but a statement. Mu Lianjue glanced at him and coldly tugged at the corner of his lips. You already know. You're just using Mu Wanru to kill Grandpa, like how you killed my mother back then, aren't you? Mu Yaja's handsome face was as cold as ice. His pair of cold eyes, in particular, were piercingly cold as they ruthlessly glared at him. Why did you do that? I want him to have a taste of what it feels like to have his loved ones destroyed one by one. It must be very painful. Mu Lianjue laughed sinisterly. Before this, the person Mu Sheng valued the most was Mu Lianjue. The one he doted on the most was Mu Lianqing. His love went deep into his bones. Love the house, love its crow. He also doted on Jiang Yishan. Hence, he killed Mu Lianqing. He also plotted against Jiang Yishan, even Mu Qingcheng. There was also Mu Qingqing's biological daughter, Yun Shishir. He wanted to ruthlessly destroy the most important things in Mu Sheng's heart one by one before his eyes, and let him have a taste of this unbearable pain. What was more painful than torturing a person was torturing a person's heart. Mental torture was what truly destroyed the heavens and earth. This old thing's life is really tough. Still, this isn't bad. Either I'll let him see with his own eyes how the Mu Empire, which he values the most, will be destroyed in his hands. The position of the Mu family's head should belong to me. If he doesn't give it to me, then even if I have to resort to unscrupulous means, I'll snatch it back. Yu Yu's chest heaved violently as she glared fiercely at him, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. Mu Lianjue paused for a moment to size up Mu Yaja's frosty eyes before sneering. Take a guess. If this old thing knew that he had always taken the thief as his daughter, and that Mu Wanru was not Mu Qingqing's biological daughter, he would have loved her dearly. However, Mu Qingqing's real flesh and blood had been destroyed by him. How painful must that have been? And when he learns that Yun Shishir is Mu Qingqing's real flesh and blood, how heartbroken will he be? On the bed, Mu Sheng's turbid eyes widened. A deep voice sounded indifferently. What is going on? Mu Lianjue and Mu Yaja looked at the bed. Mu Sheng struggled to prop himself up from the bed. His blurry eyes could not hide his anger. What do you mean by that? What happened to Lianqing? Were you the one who killed Yishan? Where was Qingcheng? Could it be that Qingcheng is also... As he spoke, his eyes turned bloodshot as he reached out to grab Mu Lianjue's arm. Mu Lianjue's eyes sharpened as he waved his hand to shake him off. Don't touch me with your hand. Hearing this, the old man was even more enraged. He had just passed the critical period and was feeling weak all over. His voice was hoarse. Did you kill Qingcheng, too? Did you? Yes. His eyes widened. What? Back then, Mu Qingqing's car's brakes malfunctioned, and it fell off the cliff because I tampered with her car. Chapter 1189. Be *starred. Mu Sheng bellowed with all his strength. His old eyes blurred as tears streamed down his cheeks. Fourth, why didn't I see your true face before? How could you be so heartless? Mu Lianjue calmly replied, I'm just giving you a taste of your own medicine. His face turned ghastly pale the moment he said that. Have you really forgotten? Have you really forgotten how my mother died? So tragically? Mu Lianjue raised his hand and grabbed him by the collar. Have you really forgotten? What tricks did you use back then to destroy my mother's family? Shut up. Mu Sheng was furious. The past surfaced in his mind, but he could not bear to look back on it. What? Why should I shut up? He. Like father, like son, you should have heard of this saying, right? Why don't you look back and see what kind of face you used to have when you're questioning me for being so heartless? Enough! A childish and cold voice interrupted them. Mu Sheng was shocked. Mu Lianjue's face froze as well. Yu raised his head and expressionlessly said, I'm not in the mood to listen to you guys talk about such useless things. After a pause, he slowly stood up and fixed his cold gaze on Mu Lianjue. What exactly do you want for you to let them go? Don't beat around the bush. State your conditions. Mu Lianjue snorted. You have no right to interrupt when the adults are talking. Yichen, get out, ordered Mu Sheng. You cast him a sidelong glance and ignored him. Mu Sheng was enraged. What? Are you not going to listen to your great-grandfather's words? Old man, you should be clear that the person standing in front of you is not Mu Yichen, Yu said expressionlessly. Clearly, he had no patience for him. Mu Sheng was stunned, and then carefully sized him up. Yu raised his arrogant chin slightly and stood beside Mu Yaja. Dressed in simple casual clothes, he exuded an elegant yet cold aura from head to toe. Mu Sheng reacted quickly. This child was not Mu Yichen. It was another child. Yun Tianyu. Mu Yaja put his arm around the boy's shoulders and suddenly said to Mu Lianjue coldly, Let's negotiate. Mu Lianjue raised his head to look at him. You've held them hostage to threaten me. If that's the case, why don't you show your hand? You don't have to hide your ambitions. I don't have the patience to play games with you. Muzazazaz, SSSSSS. Mu Lianjue's lips curled coldly. I want the Mu Group's shares in your hands. He went straight to the point. Just as Mu Yaja had expected, the man was indeed eyeing the Mu Group shares in his hands. Hence, he did not show much surprise on his face. Hearing this, however, he was shocked by Mu Lianjue's ambition. Impudent. B***, SD**RD, what are you doing? It's none of your business. Shut up. Mu Lianjue snorted angrily. Mu Sheng was at a loss for words. His shoulders trembled uncontrollably as he was filled with anger. Yu frowned and could not help looking at Mu Yaja. He heard him say without hesitation, Okay. Chapter 1190. Such a frank answer surprised the old man and made him even more suspicious. Okay. He actually agreed so calmly, without any hesitation. Was this woman that important to him, or was there a trap in this? The cunning man could not help raising his guard, cocking a brow. He clearly did not believe that Mu Yaja would hand over such an important thing to him so easily. I'm warning you, don't you dare play any tricks with me. Do you think I'm as cunning as fourth uncle? Mu Yaja sneered and mocked him mercilessly. Mu Lianjue laughed in anger. I'm warning you, if you dare to play any tricks, you can just wait to collect your corpse in the next second. He was not afraid. In this operation, he was already prepared to perish together with the enemy. Now that he had 2 lives in his hands, the pitiful mother and son would instantly turn into 2 cold corpses with a single order from him. Mu Yaja coldly retorted, They're already in your hands. What tricks can I play with you? It's good that you know that. You have to be clear about this. As long as I give the order, both of them can forget about coming to you alive. But first, I want to confirm that they're still alive. Of course, they're still alive. He snorted. Mu Yaja's eyes turned cold. I want to see it with my own eyes for this to count. He was silent for a while before calling for his assistant and whispering a few words to her. The assistant went out. Not long after, she walked in again with a phone in her hand. There was already a video call on the phone. In the video, Yun Shirshir and Mu Yichen were hugging each other. The temperature in the basement was very cold at night. Hence, Yun Shirshir and Mu Yichen hugged each other even tighter. Both of them were injured to varying degrees. Mu Yaja glanced at the video and saw a man with a scar on his face walking over and reaching out to pat Yun Shirshir's face. Yun Shirshir woke up with a start. The camera panned in. Yun Shirshir's forced calmness and calmness stung Yu's heart. It also stung Mu Yaja's eyes. "Say something to the camera," ordered the scarred man. Yun Shirshir bit her lip tightly and did not speak. "Say something." Yun Shirshir still did not speak and even avoided the camera. Yu's heart ached as if it was being stabbed. The video was not a comparison film, and every frame was fresh. Hence, when Yu saw his mother covered in injuries, he felt suffocated, and his breathing became a little irregular. Yun Shirshir's injuries seemed to be more serious than his brother's. On top of that, she had been trapped for a day and a night and hadn't had enough food and water. Her complexion was extremely unsightly, especially her lips, which were dry and cracked like the cracked earth after a long drought. "Did you see it clearly?" Mu Lianjue snorted and got someone to take down the video. Mu Yaja looked up, the coldness in his eyes turning colder. "She's seriously injured." "Yes, she's restless and stubborn, so I got someone to teach her a lesson." He then snorted. "When are you letting her go?" "Of course, we'll let her go after you sign your name on the document, and the contract takes effect." "Impossible," Mu Yaja coldly asked. "Will you really let her go after I sign my name?" "Why? You don't believe me?" Mu Yaja negotiated with him. "Let her go first." "Impossible." Mu Lianjue naturally disagreed. Chapter 1191. Yun Shirshir and Mu Yichen were two bargaining chips. Neither could be left out. Mu Yaja's eyes flashed with anger. "If we don't wait for the document to take effect, it'll take at least 3 days. 3 days. They're so seriously injured. We can't let you drag it out for another 3 days. Thus, the situation came to a standstill. Yu frowned slightly and suddenly raised his voice. "How about this? We'll each take a step back. You let one of them go first, and after the document is signed, you let the other one go. How about that?" Mu Lianjue cocked a brow and sized him up with interest. In his heart, he was secretly surprised. At such a critical moment, this child could actually come up with a solution so calmly. Let one of them go first. What else? How can we believe that you'll let them go after the document is signed? By then, the document will be in your hands, and the Mu Empire will be under your name. What if you don't let them go? That's why our rights and interests must be protected. At the very least, we need to see your sincerity before we talk about anything else." You said calmly. At this moment, he was calm and steady like a mature and wise negotiator, advancing step by step. Hearing this, Mu Lianjue could not help but re-evaluate this child in front of him. This child seemed to be a little different. For him to be able to think of this, it seemed that he had underestimated him earlier. "It's not impossible for me to let one of them go first." Mu Lianjue pondered for a moment. You stared at him nervously. Then he heard him say casually, "However, there must be an exchange." Mu Yaja cocked a brow. "What kind of exchange?" "Use him in exchange for Yun Shirshir. This is fine." He pointed at Yun Tianyu and said in a low voice, "Yun Tianyu, fine." Mu Yaja, "No." The father and son spoke at the same time. but their attitudes were completely different. The two men looked at each other, and Mu Yaja bellowed, "Are you crazy?" Yun Tianyu frowned. "What? I won't allow it." Mu Yaja said coldly, but his tone didn't allow anyone to object. What kind of father would personally send his child into the tiger's den? He couldn't just watch as Yu put herself in danger. It was impossible to make an exchange. Use him in exchange for Yun Shirshir. After the signing of the documents, release another one. Once the document comes into effect, I will release both children. What do you think? Mu Lianjue's lips curled into a confident smile. Mu Yaja's expression was frosty. Before he could open his mouth, he heard the other say nonchalantly, "If you don't agree, then there's no need for further discussion." "I agree," he answered. Mu Yaja was furious. "Shut up. I won't allow that." Yu's face stiffened. She could see the anger on his face. Mu Lianjue merely smiled. "I'm very busy and have something on, so I'll take my leave first. Let me know your answer when you have the results." With that, he slowly stood up. The ward door opened, and he slowly left, surrounded by a group of bodyguards in suits. Mu Yaja stood up abruptly and walked to the window. Even though he tried to restrain himself, he still could not suppress his anger and punched the window. Slash! A sound was heard. A few snowflake-like cracks immediately appeared on the window. Mu Sheng leaned against the bed, his hawk-like eyes sharp. "Aja, what exactly happened? Tell me." Mu Yaja turned around abruptly. His slightly messy black hair covered his pair of sharp eyes. Chapter 1192. Just focus on recuperating. You don't have to worry about anything else. With that, he turned around, carried Yu in his arms, and left. Mu Sheng lay limp on the bed, as if he had lost all his strength. His face was sickly pale and lifeless. In the car, Yu turned his head to look at the passing scenery outside the window. Suddenly, his childish voice said in a low voice, "Daddy, if you want to talk about the hostage exchange, then shut up. Don't mention it." Yu, however, said, "Mommy is seriously injured. I can't watch her continue to suffer. I want to ensure her safety first. So it's not a bad idea to exchange the hostage with Mu Lianjue." At a red light, at a crossroad, Mu Yaja stepped on the brakes, and the car came to a steady stop. He turned around and stared at him. You don't overestimate yourself. I admit that you're smart, but no matter how smart you are, you're still a weak child. I can't lose your mommy, and similarly, I can't lose you and Mui Chen. Yes, I understand. You're worried that my life will be in danger. Mommy's injuries are so serious, though. Can you really watch? No, don't say any more. Mu Yaja clenched his fists tightly. I can't lose anyone. Me too. Yu frowned, feeling a little agitated. Daddy, I'm the same as you. I can't lose anyone. You, Mommy Shaoi Chen, and I can't lose anyone. After a pause, he suddenly closed his eyes and gently placed his small hand on Mu Yaja's. It was as if he was silently giving him strength. Daddy, trust me, I know what I'm doing. Mu Yaja turned his gaze to him, but it was unfathomable. How can I trust you? Trust that you won't be in danger? The heartache in his eyes was so real and hot. Looking at him, Yun Tianyu's heart was deeply warmed by his gaze. He understood that his daddy was worried about him and felt sorry for him. But now, apart from this, we are all helpless in the current situation, aren't we? However, this is not a reason for you to take the risk. Yun Tianyu smiled, all of a sudden, his lips curling into a slight arc. Daddy, please believe me this once. I promise you that not only will I not be in danger, but I will also bring Xiao Yichen back safe and sound. Our family will be reunited, okay? As he spoke, He leaned over slightly and whispered a few words into his ear, telling him his original plan in full. When Muyaja heard this, his face changed, and his brows furrowed in suspicion. "Daddy, trust me. I won't let you down. You said seriously." Muyaja held his breath for a moment, and then closed his eyes deeply. Then he suddenly opened them and said in a deep voice, "Okay. However, you must ensure your own safety." "Yes, it's a deal." Dawn. Footsteps could be heard in the dark and damp basement. Yun Shirshir opened her eyes in a daze. In her blurry vision, she saw a few well-trained soldiers standing in front of the cell. They were armed to the teeth with guns in their hands. "What are you doing?" Yun Shirshir was frightened, but she pretended to be calm on the outside. She could not help hugging Mu Yichen tighter. Under her tight embrace, Mu Yichen inevitably felt some shortness of breath and woke up. When he opened his eyes and saw the scene before him, he could not help but be secretly alarmed and alert. Chapter 1193. "Yun Shirshir, come with us," one of the men said as he opened the door to the cell. The moment the door opened, everyone raised the guns in their hands and aimed them at Mu Yichen. They loaded their guns and prepared for battle. Yun Shirshir was shocked. She leaned forward to block Mu Yichen and said fearfully, What are you going to do to him?" "As long as you obey our orders obediently, we won't do anything to him. What do you want me to do?" The man's cold and mechanical voice sounded again. "Come with us. Stop talking nonsense and obey us obediently." Yun Shirshir's body trembled slightly. Then she stood up slowly and looked at them warily. "Hurry up, move faster. Don't waste time." The man shouted angrily again. Yun Shirshir took a deep breath and suppressed the uneasiness and nervousness in her heart. She walked towards them. Mu Yichen stood up abruptly, hugged her, and scanned the room coldly. "What are you doing? What are you trying to do by asking Mommy to go with you?" The man said angrily, "Stop talking nonsense. This has nothing to do with you. Move aside and don't get in our way." Mu Yichen hugged Yun Shirshir nervously. "Mommy, don't go with them. No matter what, I want to be with you and protect you. Don't worry. Your mommy will be fine. Don't worry." No, Mu Yichen did not believe them. He hugged Yun Shirshir even harder. "My mommy will not go with you. Kid, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Let go." "I won't let go." Mu Yichen was not afraid of their threats. He said to Yun Shirshir, "Mommy, don't be afraid. I'll be by your side." The man was furious. He rushed into the cell and raised his gun to smash him. Mu Yichen was about to retaliate when Yun Shirshir stopped him. She screamed, "Don't touch him. Stop." The man stopped moving. Yun Shirshir turned around and gently caressed Mu Yichen's face. She smiled and said, "Xiao Yichen, don't worry, okay? Mommy will be fine. You stay here and wait for Mommy to come back, okay?" "Mommy, I'm scared. I'm scared. Don't leave me." "They won't do anything to me. If they want my life, they have plenty of chances. So, Mommy will come back in one piece. Be good and wait for Mommy here, okay?" Mu Yichen was stunned for a moment before he nodded blankly. The cell door was locked again. Mu Yichen watched as Yun Shirshir was taken away, and worry appeared on his face. When she left the underground warehouse, she was blindfolded and her mouth was sealed. She could not make a sound. His hands were cuffed, and he couldn't move. "Go!" The person behind her pushed her, and she stumbled forward a few steps before she was carried into the car. She didn't know how long they had been driving. She counted in her heart for a long time. After about half an hour, the car stopped. Then there was a long period of silence. There was no movement in the car, and it made her heart palpitate. Her breathing gradually quickened. The car door suddenly opened. "Get out!" She immediately became nervous. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" The man scolded. "Shut up and stop talking nonsense. Get out of the car." Yun Shirshir was pushed out of the car. The man behind her continued to push her from time to time. However, she couldn't see the road clearly and tripped on a rock, almost falling. Chapter 1194. Having been trapped in a confined space for a long time, it was dark, damp, and dark. Her eyes had not been exposed to sunlight for a long time, so she was not used to it. She opened her eyes and took some time to adjust before her vision became clear again. However, the scene in front of her surprised her. Looking around, she saw that she was standing on a high slope. Being on high ground, she could see far away. Not far away, a row of military vehicles was parked. However, what attracted her attention was Mu Yaja, who was standing tall among the crowd. Beside him was Yun Tianyu. Yun Shirshir was shocked. She subconsciously wanted to call out to him, but her mouth was sealed, so she could not make a sound. Hence, she leaned forward and ran toward them subconsciously. Behind her, a fully armed man walked forward and grabbed her. "Don't move," he said sternly. "Stand still." The next second, the cold muzzle of a gun was pressed against her temple. Yun Shirshir was stunned and did not dare to move. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Mu Yaja and Yu. Mu Yaja looked at her and gave her a resolute look, as if he was comforting her silently. Yu saw Yun Shirshir, who was standing on the high slope. She was surrounded by a group of fully armed soldiers. Her eyes were brimming with tears, and she looked lonely and helpless. "Mommy, don't be afraid." Yu said this in his heart, and then looked at Mu Yaja. The father and son silently exchanged glances. "Let's begin. Exchange hostages." Under the escort of Mu Yaja's men, Yu walked forward. The latter's men came forward and checked him from head to toe. Soon, their eyes locked on the watch on Yu's wrist. "What is this?" "This is just a watch." Yu pretended to be calm. "Take it off." Yu was stunned and did not react immediately. That person became even more suspicious and sternly said, "Take it off, do you hear me?" Yu remained motionless. Without another word, the man stepped forward and violently tore off his watch, throwing it far away. "Uncle, I'm still a child. Please be gentle. You're scaring me," you said weakly. Behind him, Mu Yaja was startled. "He's just a child. What do you mean by making things difficult for him?" Mu Yaja's voice was extremely cold. His gaze was dangerous, but it was a silent deterrent. With him around, the man's movements became gentler. Then, a group of people surrounded him and checked him from head to toe. Then, they took away all his mobile phones, communication devices, and even a button. He sneered inwardly. This group of people was quite professional. Not even a single button was spared. He had indeed installed a GPS chip in the button, but this group of people did not leave a single button untouched. "Uncle, will you only be satisfied after taking off all my clothes?" You asked softly and blinked innocently. That person snorted and ignored him. He then took out a pair of handcuffs and handcuffed his hands. Following that, he covered his eyes and pushed him. Yun Tianyu obediently followed them. At the same time, Yun Shirshir was pushed over by the people on the other side. The two groups of people approached each other. Chapter 1195. Yun Tianyu obediently followed them. At the same time, Yun Shirshir was being pushed over by those people. The two groups of people approached each other. Yun Shirshir was startled to see Yun Tianyu being held hostage as they walked over. She was a little surprised, and a trace of panic flashed across her eyes. She stared unblinkingly at Yun Tianyu. Seeing that he was being pushed in their direction, she became increasingly nervous. What were they trying to do? Why were those people handcuffing Yu and blindfolding him? Yun Shir had an ominous feeling in her heart. She widened her eyes and struggled to run toward him, but she was stopped and pulled back to her original position. What were they doing? She wanted to cry out in alarm, but in the end, she could only utter a few scattered words when the words reached her mouth. Woo, 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 woo. Yun Shir tried her best to speak, but her mouth was sealed, so she could not utter a complete and coherent sentence. The man beside her pushed her shoulder and bellowed, "Stay still and don't move. Walk forward." Woo woo. Yun Shir refused to comply. She did not know what they were trying to do. Why were they handcuffing Yu? Why were they blindfolding him? Could it be, were they exchanging hostages? This thought flashed across Yun Shir's mind. She suddenly stopped in her tracks and refused to move. However, the people behind her pushed her hard, and she stubbornly refused to move. She could not exchange hostages. Absolutely not. She could not let Yu be exchanged with her. Yu was still so young and weak. How could he withstand such hellish torture? Who was the one who requested this? Was it Mu Yaja? As she thought of this, she turned to look at Mu Yaja abruptly. Her eyes flashed with anger, followed by disbelief. Why did he do this? Why did he push Yu into this abyss of suffering? What was he thinking? Walk forward and don't stop. Go. The person behind her continued to push her. However, Yun Shir clenched her teeth tightly. Tears gushed out in an instant. She refused to move forward. No matter how hard they pushed her, she refused to obey. Yu turned his head in the direction of the sound. His hearing was very sharp, so he immediately heard the sound of body contact coming from Yun Shir's direction. Don't touch her. Yun Tianyu suddenly shouted. Yun Shir was stunned, but Yu said slowly, "Mommy, do as they say. Go back to Daddy, and you'll be safe." What did he mean? What about him? Where was Xiaoi Chen? Yun Shir's thoughts were in a mess for a moment. There were too many things she didn't understand. She did not know what Yun Tianyu and Mu Yaja were thinking. She only knew that since she had implicated Xiaoi Chen, she could not implicate Yu as well. Hence, even though Yu said so, she could not move her feet. "Mommy, listen to me, okay?" Yu's eyes were covered. He could only turn toward her based on the sound of her voice. His lips curled into a smile, but his expression was calm and elegant. "Mommy, don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Trust me now. Just this once, okay?" No. Yun Shir shook her head with all her might as tears streamed down her face. No mother would stand by and watch her child put in danger. She would not do that. All the more, Yun Tianyu knew very well that with his mother's stubborn character, she would not listen to him. Chapter 1196. Yu had a sense of propriety. He would not allow himself to take risks if he was not fully confident. However, Yun Shir did not know much about him. Her impression of him was that he was obedient, sensible, and innocent. She did not know if he had such capabilities. Hence, she would not watch him take risks. Hence, he said, "Hold on. I want to talk to my mommy." No. The man beside him rejected his request expressionlessly. Why not? You pretended to be aggrieved and frightened. I can't even say a few words. Are you afraid that we'll play some tricks? That person did not speak. You sneered. A weak woman and a 7-year-old child. Moreover, you have so many men. How can we not be careful when we're right under your noses? That person was silent for a moment. He turned around and discussed with the leader. Then he turned around and agreed. You have 1 minute. Okay. That person brought Yu to Yun Shir. Yun Shirshir rushed to his side and squatted down. She raised her hands, wanting to hug him, but she could not do so because her hands were handcuffed. Hence, she could only hold his hands tightly. Woo woo, mommy, mommy, Yu raised his handcuffed hands and caressed her blood-stained face. His heart ached as he wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes. His fingertips brushed across her cheeks and carefully wiped away the bloodstains. Does it hurt? The heartache in his eyes could not be hidden. Yu's eyes were a little wet. He was a patient person and rarely shed tears. However, when he saw the shocking injuries on Yun Shirshir's body, he could not stop his tears from welling up. ***, why did she have so many injuries? Yun Tianyo's heart was in excruciating pain, as if it was being pierced by needles. When Yun Shirshir heard this, she shook her head as though she wanted to tell him that she wasn't in pain, not at all. Yun Tianyu did not know whether to laugh or cry. He smiled helplessly. How could it not hurt? Mommy is a liar. She must be in a lot of pain, with so many injuries. Pausing for a moment, a chilling glint flashed across his eyes. Hatred as sharp as a knife flashed across his eyes. No matter who it was, he would definitely make his mommy pay for the injuries on her body 1,000 times over. His mommy, whom he had always taken good care of, was now in such a sorry state. Yu could not wait to hack Mu Lianjue into 1,000 pieces. Even death by 1,000 cuts would not be enough to appease his hatred. Yu held her face with her small hands and gently kissed away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Then she affectionately kissed her forehead. A charming and elegant smile suddenly appeared on her face. Mommy, trust me, wait for me. I'll bring Xiao Yichen home safely. Recuperate well and wait for us to come back. Yun Shirshir suddenly panicked. She desperately shook her head and held Yu's hand tightly, refusing to let go no matter what. She wished that time would stop at this moment. Don't separate. Don't separate from him. Time's up. The two were forced to separate. Yun Shirshir struggled with all her might. The man beside her frowned, stepped forward, raised his arm, and gave her a hard chop on the back of her neck. Ugh! Yun Shirshir's vision turned black. She only felt the world spinning before she lost consciousness, and her body went limp. Chapter 1197. Just as Muyaja reached out, Yun Shirshir fell limply into his arms. Her body was as light as a feather. She was frighteningly thin. Moreover, she was covered in blood and bruises. The hideous bloodstains stung his eyes at once. He pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. In his heart, he felt as if he had regained what he had lost. He almost thought that he was going to lose her. Now that she was in his arms, her petite body was not enough to occupy his entire heart, yet it felt so real. Mu Yaja hugged her tightly, with heartache. When he looked up, he saw that Yun Tianyu had already been pushed into the car. The car door was closed, and he seemed to be cut off from the world. His brows furrowed slightly as he ordered, "Let's go back." "Yes, boss." Minyu opened the car door, and Mu Yaja carried Yun Shirshir into the car. The car sped off. The two cars drove in opposite directions and gradually drifted away. In an underground warehouse, the shutter door slowly opened. Mu Yichen stood up abruptly and looked nervously at the door. However, Yun Shirshir was not there. Instead, there was a figure that surprised him. Yu, go in. That person pushed him hard. Yun Tianyu staggered into the warehouse. The moment he stepped in, he could feel the cold and gloomy air in the warehouse. The door closed, and the blindfold was removed from his eyes. The musty smell and the faint smell of blood assaulted his nostrils. He could not help frowning in disgust. After adjusting to the dim environment, he looked around, and his gaze landed on Mu Yichen in the cell. "Brother," just as he called out softly, the man behind him kicked him in the back. Yu was caught off guard and lost his balance, causing him to fall to the ground. Mu Yichen bellowed angrily, "What are you doing? Don't touch him." "Be ****. Shut up." That person shouted and coldly glanced at Yu. He said indifferently, "Stand up. Don't be so rough with a child. Are you a man?" Yu snorted and stood up. That person raised his eyebrows. Although this child was young, he actually had a way with words, just like a little adult. He smiled contemptuously and was about to push him when Yu said coldly, "Don't touch me." "Brat, you better know your place." "I can walk by myself." Yu glared at him coldly and interrupted him. Then she locked herself up without any resistance. She was surprisingly obedient. Mu Yichen grabbed onto the bars and saw Yu step into the cell. Mu Yichen anxiously walked towards him, but his legs were chained up. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get close to him. Yu shushed him and gave him a look. With the tacit understanding between brothers, Mu Yichen understood the meaning in his eyes and obediently kept his mouth shut. Soon, Yu's legs and hands were shackled. He and Mu Yichen were separated from each other. They then retreated, leaving only a few soldiers to keep watch. In Mu Lianjue's eyes, 2 7-year-old children were much easier to control than an adult. Children were innocent and timid. They would be much more obedient after a little scare. That was what he thought. The sky soon turned dark. After a long period of concentration, the few soldiers who stayed behind to keep watch gradually felt sleepy. Chapter 1198. Even though they were well-trained soldiers, they were still made of flesh and blood after all. They were not machines made of steel. Hence, they would feel tired. In addition, watching over the 2 children was an extremely boring task in their eyes. How big of a commotion could the children cause? Hence, they let down their guard a little and walked to the door in 2s and 3s. Each of them had a cigarette and started chatting. Yu and Mu Yichen looked at each other. Mu Yichen had rested his eyes last night, and his condition had improved. During the day, the Scarface man had fed him a bowl of porridge. Hence, he had regained some of his strength. He had been training in the special training camp since he was young. Hence, his physical strength was amazing. Especially his recovery speed. It was jaw-dropping. Although he was seriously injured, most of them were external injuries. There were no injuries to his tendons or bones. At most, it was just some physical pain. He did not care about it at all. Yu sized him up. Seeing that he was injured all over, he frowned with pity. "Brother, does it hurt?" Mu Yichen was stunned. This was not the first time Yu had called him brother. However, this time it was different from before. There was a rare tenderness and pity in Yu's eyes. He did not even try to hide the heartache in his eyes. Mu Yichen felt a warmth in his heart. His thin lips curled up, but he did not mind. "It doesn't hurt. It's just a small injury." Yu's gaze changed, but he doubted his words. "Small injury? I've suffered more serious injuries in the past. Don't worry about me." Mu Yichen comforted him gently. Yu felt a stab in his heart. He didn't know if he was putting on an act to comfort him and not make him worry, or if these injuries were really just minor injuries to him. However, these injuries were not on his body. He could not sympathize with them. He just could not bear to see him in tattered clothes. He felt an inexplicable sense of guilt in his heart, because between him and his mommy, he chose to protect his mommy first. Yu had a complicated expression on her face as she thought of this. Mu Yichen saw the strange look in his eyes, as if he was blaming himself. Worried, he asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. What's going on?" Mu Chen lowered his voice and asked, "Where's Mommy?" Daddy offered to release one person, but Mu Lianjue refused, so the two sides exchanged hostages. "Mommy is safe now." As soon as you finished speaking, Mu Yichen finally felt relieved. He let out a long sigh of relief. "That's great." Yu was shocked. "You don't blame me? Why should I blame you?" Mu Yichen looked at him in confusion. Yu hesitated for a moment and said guiltily, "Because I could have exchanged hostages with you and had the chance to protect you, but I chose to exchange hostages with Mommy to protect her first. What you did was right." Mu Yichen interrupted him in a low voice. Yu's eyes widened in surprise at his firm tone. "Mommy's injuries are more serious than mine. So, you didn't make the wrong choice. If it were me, I would have done the same." At this moment, the two brothers were of the same mind. Yu was stunned for a moment before he smiled cheerfully. How could he forget that Mu Yichen, this older brother of his, had always been a very responsible person? In his heart, protecting his mommy was probably his #1 priority. Chapter 1199. Hearing this, Mu Yichen's heart warmed. It was as if countless streams of warmth had gushed into his body, causing his originally cold body to warm up. He tilted his head, seemingly trying to scare him. "Aren't you afraid?" You turned around. His eyes were calm and steady as he said slowly, "You're kidding." His words, however, revealed the leisurely and elegant posture of a king, calm and unhurried. For some reason, even though he had such a young and tender face, his every frown and smile gave off a feeling that he was surrounded by mountains and surrounded by stars. "What should we do now?" Yu lowered his gaze, silently. He leaned back slowly and said casually, "Wait." In the hospital, Yun Shirshir woke up with a start from a nightmare and sat up abruptly on the hospital bed, only to see a snow-white world. The unique smell of disinfectant in the hospital was pungent. The windows were slightly open, and the curtains were fluttering. The night breeze blew in through the window, and she shivered unconsciously. She felt a chill and shivered slightly. Before she could move, a coat was draped over her shoulders. Above her head, she heard Mu Yaja's voice. She turned her head abruptly, only to see Mu Yaja sitting on the edge of the bed. His gentle gaze fell on her as he adjusted her clothes with heartache. "Be careful not to catch a cold." As soon as he said that, Yun Shirshir grabbed his slender fingers tightly. Her bloodshot eyes stared at him fiercely. "Where's Yu? Where is he?" Mu Yaja looked at her calmly, but did not answer. Yun Shirshir gripped his hand even harder. Her grip was so strong that it almost hurt him. "Answer me. Tell me, where's Yu? Where is he?" Mu Yaja held her shoulders and helped her lie down. "You're seriously injured. Don't talk too much. Lie down and rest." Yun Shirshir abruptly flung his hand away, and a trace of icy coldness appeared on her face. "Why do you always avoid answering my questions? Let me ask you, where is Yu? She asked word by word. Every word was practically squeezed out from the roots of her teeth. Her pair of eyes became even more unreasonably red. Mu Yaja frowned, but remained silent. "Why aren't you talking?" Yun Shirshir paused for a moment. Her throat moved, and her voice was hoarse and trembling. "Don't tell me you really let him exchange with me and become a hostage?" Mu Yaja replied indifferently. "Why? Why are you doing this?" Yun Shirshir screamed. "Mu Yaja, how can you be so cruel?" He was still a child, only 7 years old. How could you bear to let him be a hostage? Do you know how dangerous this is? She was agitated and anxious. Her pale face had green veins popping out. Her skin was so pale that even the blood capillaries could be seen clearly. She was extremely haggard. Muyaja looked at her deeply. Suddenly, he said in a deep voice, I know. If you know, why did you still do this? Are you crazy? Are you crazy? She questioned him crazily at the top of her lungs. His sullen face made her even angrier. She grabbed a pillow from the side and threw it at him. How can you be like this? I hate you, I hate you. Her movements were so intense that the wound on her waist that had just been stitched up split open, and dark red blood seeped out of it. Her body was injured to varying degrees. Chapter 1200. Among them, there was a deep wound on her waist that required 5 stitches. There was a wound on her ankle that required 4 stitches. There were bruises all over her body, and her shoulder was dislocated. But now she seemed to have gone crazy, as if she couldn't feel the pain in her body at all. Muyaja suddenly stopped her. Don't move. Your wound has just been stitched up. Get lost. Don't touch me. She cut him off with a roar and pushed him away violently. She almost used all her strength. Muyaja lost his balance after being pushed by her and fell onto the wall. How can you be so cruel as to take you as a hostage? You're so cruel. If you want to take her as a hostage, why don't you go? Why don't you go? Muyaja, how can you be so cruel? Why did I meet you? You bring me more danger, more harm, more nightmares. Why? She blurted out the question unconsciously. Even Yun Shirshir was taken aback when she yelled this out. It seemed that those words were a little too much. Muyaja's face was still as calm as before. After a long silence, he helplessly tugged at his lips and looked down tiredly. Yun Shirshir also realized how hurtful her words were. But once the words were said, it was like spilled water that couldn't be taken back. She suddenly fell silent, lowered her head, and clutched the bedsheets tightly. Her tears dripped onto the white bedsheets, leaving faint traces. Self-reproach, guilt, worry, heartache, all of them came to her mind. She was overwhelmed with a myriad of emotions, like a tidal wave that wanted to engulf her. She didn't mean to hurt him with those words, but she couldn't understand, she really couldn't understand why he had to sacrifice the 2 children to protect her. The nurse had just entered the ward with 2 packets of medicine when she saw the blood seeping out of the bandage on her waist. She frowned. What happened? Why did the wound split open? She hurried forward, wanting to change her bandage. Just as she touched her, Yun Shirshir avoided her and didn't let her touch her. The nurse frowned. It was a little tricky. However, he heard Muyaja say, "Get out." "Chairman Mu?" The nurse looked shocked and explained, "The patient's wound has split open. I'll change it for her. Get out." He said coldly again. She naturally did not dare to object to his orders. She hurriedly put down the medicine in her hand and left. Muyaja sat back down on the bed and reached out to touch the gauze around her waist. Yun Shirshir dodged again, obviously unwilling to be touched by him. "Don't be willful," he looked up and said in a low voice. Yun Shirshir's eyes widened in shock. Just as she was about to speak, she heard him say in a deep voice, "If possible, even if I have to exchange my life for it, I will never let him take the risk." As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Shirshir's eyes trembled, and her heart instantly collapsed. Muyaja looked up, his lips stiff and cold. He didn't agree to it at first. However, Yu stubbornly asked him to believe him. Fine, then he would believe him. He believed that his son could confidently promise him that he would bring Xiao Yichen back to his side safely. Then he would believe him. However, Yun Shirshir didn't know about his plan. She was still a little angry with him and was a little resistant to his actions. Muyaja frowned and caressed her face gently. "Don't avoid me, okay? After I change your bandage, lie down quietly I won't touch you. There was a hint of pleading in his words. Without a doubt, he was lowering himself to plead with her, putting down all his pride. Chapter 12:01. Only then did Muyaja heave a sigh of relief. He untied the gauze and reapplied the ointment. His movements were extremely serious and gentle, and his technique was also very professional. A trace of cold touch came from the wound, and she couldn't help but shudder a little. Does it hurt? He looked up nervously. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and remained silent. Muyaja continued his actions. After he was done bandaging her wound, he stood up and turned around. She abruptly reached out and anxiously wrapped her arms around his waist. Muyaja's body froze as his expression froze. Don't go. She was afraid, really afraid. Muyaja, don't go. I didn't mean to hurt you. She choked on her sobs, and her voice broke. She hugged him even tighter. Don't go. Her helpless appearance was like a small boat drifting on the sea, bobbing up and down, panicking in the storm. Muyaja sat back on the bed and hugged her. His big palm gently stroked her trembling back and said in a deep voice, "They'll be fine. Don't be afraid. I won't let anything happen to them." Really? She was skeptical, but her face was still uneasy. Yes, sure, me, you, Xiaoi Chen, and you, 4 of us. Not one less. Muyaja hugged her tighter. Yun Shirshir pursed her lips and held back her tears and uneasiness. She hugged his waist and buried her face in his chest, but she could no longer suppress the fear in her heart. Her hot tears burned his skin in an instant. Muyaja's heart felt like it was being stabbed by a knife. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead heavily. Don't be afraid. Suddenly, footsteps came from the door. Yun Shirshir was startled. She looked up and saw Mu Sheng walking in with the help of a nurse. The old man suddenly aged a lot overnight. His white hair grew, and the wrinkles on his face deepened. He walked into the ward, stopped by the bed, and looked at her. Previously, when he found out that he had always regarded the thief as his daughter, and that Mu Wanru was not Mu Qingqing's real flesh and blood, Yun Shirshir, whom he had always hated, was actually Mu Qingqing's real daughter. Mu Sheng was stunned for a long time when he learned the truth. He still could not accept it. In that case, Yun Shirshir, whom he had always regarded as an invader and an unclean woman, was the child he had been searching for more than 10 years. And Mu Wanru was just an impostor who stole her identity. This fact was too much of a blow for him to accept. That day, when they were strolling in Xiangdi, he was so angry that he didn't even have time to see Yun Shirshir's face clearly. In his anger, he actually attacked her. When he thought of this, anger, doubt, regret, self-blame, pain, all of these emotions welled up in his heart. I wonder what it feels like. As soon as Yun Shirshir saw him, she couldn't calm down. Her face darkened as she asked coldly, "What are you doing here?" Mu Sheng choked for a moment. He was silent for a while. His face was no longer as fierce as before, and there was a hint of fragility in his aged voice. "I'm here to see you." His tone was careful. He looked at her. There was no need to hide the remorse and self-blame in his eyes. Mu Sheng sized up Yun Shirshir's delicate features. The more he looked, the more he could see Mu Qingqing's shadow on her face. Alike. They were really alike. Chapter 12:02. At this moment, he was even more convinced that Yun Shirshir was Mu Qingqing's real flesh and blood. As for him, for more than a decade, he had actually acknowledged the thief as his daughter. The person whom he had cherished so dearly was actually an impostor. At this thought, he felt extremely guilty and remorseful. More than that, he flew into a rage out of humiliation. He had almost ruined her, ruined Mu Qingqing's daughter. His heart was in agony. "Your name is Yun Shirshir, right?" His voice trembled. "All these years, Grandpa has been looking for you all over the world, but I didn't expect you to— Shut up. Yun Shirshir fumed. You're not allowed to call me by my name. You have no right to call me by my name. The old man's face froze in shock and pain. His mouth trembled uncontrollably as his face turned pale. Shirshir, don't be agitated. You're injured now. Don't talk anymore. Shut up. Don't call me by my name. Yun Shirshir's face hurt as she raged. You have no right to call me by my name. Mu Sheng, are you feeling smug now? Are you satisfied now? Isn't it all thanks to you that I'm in this state? Her cold and indifferent words were no doubt a sharp blade stabbing him. Hearing this, the pain in his heart intensified. His eyes stung, but he had nothing to say. Yes, if he had not been muddle-headed back then, he would not have caused her to suffer so much. It was understandable for her to blame, resent, and hate him. However, this was not what he wanted. He did not expect that he would end up in this state because of a moment of foolishness. He hurriedly consoled her. Okay. Grandpa won't call you by your name. Let's talk about this after you've recovered, okay? Yun Shirshir's face turned cold as she squeezed out a few words through gritted teeth. You're not my grandpa. The old man was stunned, as if he had been struck by lightning. Yun Shirshir added, Mu Sheng, do you know? When my mother talks about you, she only says that you're a cruel executioner who destroyed her life. You're not my grandpa, and I won't acknowledge you. Give up. Mu Sheng's blow was even more severe. He staggered a few steps backward, his heart aching terribly. He trembled as he clutched his chest, his eyes revealing the pain of being hurt. Shirshir, listen to Grandpa's explanation, okay? Grandpa was wrong. Grandpa was really wrong. From now on, Grandpa will make it up to you and make up for the sins that Grandpa committed. Don't be angry with Grandpa, and don't say such cruel words, okay? The old master was an old man. When he was young, he was resolute and decisive. He was an iron-blooded man who stood at a high position. But now, he was humbly lowering himself to beg for her forgiveness. After knowing the truth, he was tormented by self-blame and guilt. Yun Shirshir's heartless words were undoubtedly rubbing salt on his wound, making it even harder for him to bear. Yun Shirshir sneered. What? Don't you think it's too late to realize your mistake now? If it weren't for you, my mother wouldn't have left me. My brother won't leave me either. You're the one who harmed me and ruined my family. You're a murderer, a cruel executioner. Get lost. I don't want to see you. Get lost. She chased him away. Mu Sheng's body froze on the spot, unwilling to leave. He had yet to take a good look at her. She was injured. He heard that she was covered in blood when she was brought back. Chapter 12:03. His heart ached when he heard that, and he wanted to see how badly she was hurt. Now, she was like a hedgehog with all her quills standing up, refusing to let him get close to her. His lips trembled as he choked on his sobs. Yun Shirshir's words were heartless and cold. She did not give him any face or a way out of this embarrassing situation. Still, he stubbornly refused to leave. He looked at her with bloodshot eyes. She said, You're not my grandpa, and I won't acknowledge you. Give up. She continued, You're the one who ruined my family. You're a murderer, a cruel executioner. Get lost. I don't want to see you. She kept saying that she did not want to see him and wanted to chase him away. Even though his face was being trampled on, he thickened his old face and refused to leave. He wanted to take advantage of his limited time to see her more. When he heard that she was seriously injured, he was so worried that he did not care, that he could not stand for long periods of time. He rushed to her ward to take a good look at her. However, before he could say anything, she said that she did not want to see him. His heart ached as if it was being stabbed by a knife. However, In this situation, he could not blame her or anyone else. He was the one who was muddle-headed and did something stupid. He was too self-righteous, and in the end, he overreached himself and made things so out of hand. It was reasonable that she did not want to see him. Sure, Grandpa. When he sensed Yun Shursher's piercing gaze on him, he immediately changed his words to prevent her from losing control of her emotions. I really didn't expect things to turn out like this. If I'd known, I really wouldn't have made such a mistake. I'm old and muddle-headed. I've let you and your mother down. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but don't chase me away. Let me see you more, okay? Let me take a few more looks at you. As he spoke, his emotions were on the verge of breaking down. His voice was so hoarse that it sounded as if it was mixed with gravel. He choked on his sobs. I'm afraid. I don't have much time left. My body is getting weaker and weaker. Every day I live as a day less. I can't take it lying down if I don't take a good look at you. You can scold me, you can do whatever you want, but don't chase me away. I'll stand far away and not make any noise. I'll just watch you like this. That's fine too. After a series of sincere pleas, this superior who had been able to call the wind and summon the rain all his life put down all his arrogance in front of her. His dim eyes looked at her emotionally, as if countless tears would burst out from his eyes in the next second. Yun Shursher, however, remained expressionless from the beginning to the end. She didn't look at him, as if she didn't hear his pleas. She was not in the mood to listen to anything he had to say. Her heart was filled with the safety of the two little fellows. How could she care about anything else? Scram! I don't want to see you. I don't want to see you for the rest of my life. Yun Shursher's voice was cold again, but she didn't leave any room for negotiation as she ordered him to leave. Mu Sheng's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but when he caught a glimpse of her cold expression, he stopped abruptly. Afraid of angering her, he let out a long sigh helplessly. He was on the verge of tears. Really, he felt a little helpless. He didn't know how to make up for the mistakes he had made, and he didn't know how to bridge the gap between them. He was old and muddle-headed. Chapter 1204. At this moment, the person standing in front of him was no longer the domineering Mu family's head, Mu Sheng. He was just a pitiful old man. He was not heartless enough to make things difficult for a pitiful old man. Hence, he said, Grandpa, return to the ward first. Shursher is in a bad mood. Let's put this matter aside for now. Okay. Aja, you keep her company. Mu Sheng lamented in his heart. He looked at her longingly before he left with the help of others. After leaving the ward, he stood outside the door. Tears of regret overflowed from his eyes. He raised his old hand and slowly wiped them away. Master Mu, let's return to the ward, okay? The nurse, who was watching from the side, patiently persuaded him. Mu Sheng's body trembled uncontrollably. When love became a sin, it was no longer a form of sustenance, but a burden. It was a dead end, and there was no way to salvage it. Even if it was an unintentional mistake, sometimes no mistake could be forgiven. The dispute of 3 generations. Could it be that in his lifetime he would not be able to draw an end to it? Yes, it was his fault, and he was willing to bear it. But he had to give him a chance. In the ward, Yun Shursher clutched the blanket tightly. No matter how hard she tried to restrain herself, one could vaguely see from her trembling fingertips that she could not calm down. Looking at Mu Sheng, she was reminded of those nightmarish memories. Scenes flashed before her eyes like a merry-go-round. Every frame of the video was shocking to the eye. She hated how strong her memory was. Those frightening scenes had not dissipated even after more than a decade. They remained in the deepest part of her memory, as if deeply engraved by a soldering iron, and could not be erased. That year, when she was 9, she tasted despair for the first time. She could have had an ordinary life, with a mother who loved her and a cute little brother. She also thought that the days would pass by peacefully and peacefully. However, she really did not know which came first, tomorrow or the accident. What came earlier than tomorrow was an accident. Clearly, this accident should not have happened. If not for that accident, she should be very happy now, right? She knew that she shouldn't be so stubborn on this issue. But even after being stuck in a dead end for more than 10 years, he still couldn't figure out this problem. Mu Yaja sat on the edge of the bed and watched her trembling body from uneasiness and fear. His heart ached as he held her in his arms. Yun Shirshir hugged him back. She had placed almost all of her dependence on him. "It hurts," Yun Shirshir said in a low voice. Her throat was hoarse and choked with sobs. Mu Yaja tensed up and asked with a frown, "Where does it hurt?" He thought that one of her wounds was hurting again. However, he did not expect that she would lead his hand to her heart. This place, Mu Yaja was stunned. "I feel a little suffocated. Given time, the injuries on his body would heal. However, there were some things from the past that clearly did not leave any wounds, but it was like a thorn in his heart. Every time he breathed, he would feel a faint pain. She could not forgive him. It wasn't that she was cold-hearted. Chapter 1205. She hated him. Every low point in her life had something to do with him. Therefore, she could not force herself to forgive a sinner. Gong Jia had a physically and mentally exhausting dream. In his dream, he could vaguely see the scenery outside the window flashing by. It was so fast that he wondered if he was sitting in a car or on a rocket. It was so fast that his heart was in a mess. Every sharp turn on the mountain road, the friction between the tires and the ground was accompanied by smoke rising in spirals. He grabbed his seatbelt in fear and turned around. Through the rear window of the car, he could see rows after rows of black cars chasing after them relentlessly. Young and ignorant, he had no idea what was going on. He only knew that the car was going very fast, so fast that his heart felt like it was going to jump out of his chest. "Mommy, I'm scared," he shouted nervously. Mu Qingcheng gripped the steering wheel nervously and stared straight ahead. In this tense moment, she could not care less about comforting the two frightened children. "Don't be scared. Big sister is here. Big sister will protect you." In the front passenger seat, a girl who looked similar to him turned around and looked at him gently. Even though she was also scared, she still pretended to be calm and comforted him. "Big sister, I'm scared. Are we going to die? Don't say such things. We'll be fine. Don't be scared." He swallowed with difficulty and said in a weak and helpless voice, "Mommy, I'm scared." "Slow down. Slow down. Slow down." As soon as he finished speaking, he stared blankly at the cliff in front of the car, which was surrounded by a fence. He covered his eyes in fear. Then he heard the screeching sound of brakes. "The brakes are not working." "Ah," accompanied by an ear-piercing scream. The car broke through the fence and rushed out of the cliff. The car lost control and flipped down the mountain. The world spun, and his little body was knocked around in the car. Then he fainted. When he opened his eyes, he saw his sister dragging his body and trying to pull him out of the car. He wanted to struggle, but to his horror, he found that his arm was twisted at a strange angle, as if a bone was broken. He was so scared that his face turned pale, and a few intermittent sobs came out of his throat. At that time, he actually didn't feel any pain, and he only felt that his senses were muddled and his consciousness was in chaos. In her blurred vision, she could only see her sister's strenuous expression. Then he saw a strange movement from the corner of his eye. He saw Mu Qingcheng in the driver's seat, her face covered in blood. "Mommy, just as he reached out his hand. In the next second, there was a boom. The car burst into flames, and a heat wave swept over them like an avalanche. The flames soared to the sky. The whole car was ablaze. The huge fire instantly engulfed Mu Qingqing's figure. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at the scene in front of him in disbelief. Mommy. In the hotel, Gong Jie suddenly woke up from his dream and sat up. His handsome face was pale with lingering fear. The moment he opened his eyes, he realized that it was a dream. It was that nightmare again. It had been repeated countless times over the past decade. Every time, the scene of his mother being devoured by the scourge from more than 10 years ago repeated itself. Young Master Gong, did you have another nightmare? Chapter 1206. The girl was dressed in a tight-fitting camouflage uniform with a bulletproof vest draped over it. Nevertheless, her curvaceous figure was still on full display. The trident on the belt at the back of her waist shone with a subtle luster, while the desert eagle, which gave off a cold gleam, was quietly buckled on the far left, ready to be used at any time. Her two slender legs were tightly wrapped in an ocean camouflage scarf. She wore a pair of suave combat boots with a sharp defensive saber strapped to the inner side of the boots. Her black iron wrist guard was delicately engraved with the image of a vermilion bird bathed in flames. The night breeze blew in through the slightly open windows. The girl's short and elegant blonde hair fluttered in the wind, wantonly invading her ice-cold and beautiful face. Under her handsome brows was a pair of seductive peach blossom eyes. This girl was none other than one of Mercenary Paradise's top leaders, Vermilion Bird. At the same time, she was also Gong Jie's personal subordinate. Gong Jie did not respond, but only frowned slightly. Vermilion Bird served him a cup of tea with a meticulous expression. Gong Jie sipped a few mouthfuls of tea and slowly calmed himself down. He raised his head to glance at her. Vermilion Bird stood beside him with a cold expression and did not utter a word. Gong Jie asked lightly, "Vermilion Bird." "Yes. Where's the little lad?" "That rascal called Yun Tianyu." She answered, "Yu is on his way to the target location as a hostage exchange." "When do we take action?" "Tonight. We'll set off in the wee hours of the morning to carry out the rescue." Gong Jie asked again, "Has the location been successfully located?" "We've already obtained the precise location. Our men are all present. We'll set off in the wee hours of the morning." Gong Jie cocked a brow and curled his lips into an amused smile. That lad is really something. It turned out that Yun Tianyu had made ample preparations before he became a hostage exchange. He was equipped with a GPS device from head to toe. His necklace, watch, and even buttons were implanted with a mini GPS device. Alas, Mu Lianjue's men were very cautious. After all, they were from the military and were highly vigilant. Hence, they removed all the GPS device from Yun Tianyu's body. Yun Tianyu, however, was not surprised as he had already expected this. These were just bluffs to dispel those people's wariness. Earlier, when Yun Tianyu returned from the Mu residence, while treating his wound, he instructed a doctor whom he had worked with to implant a nano-positioning chip into the skin of his shoulder. This nanochip was a super chip that he had developed. It was anti-shielding and had a very strong positioning ability. It could be controlled within a range of 100 meters, which was practically a black Yun Tianyu and had yet to be developed. He guessed that Mu Lianjue would use a high-tech shielding device to block all GPS signals in order to deceive others. However, those shielding devices were completely useless against the super nanochip he had developed. Even 100 secrets would have a flaw. One Mu Lianjue. Mu had Mu. By Mu's Mu was. Even if there was one, it would be blocked by the device. In such a large area, it was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find a hidden spot for the hostages. Chapter 1207. If Mu Lianjue got angry, the hostages' lives might be in danger. He had many concerns about this. Hence, after much consideration, he decided to propose a hostage exchange. That was because he had a nano chip on him, so the anti-jamming device was useless. If he exchanged with his mother, at least his men would be able to track their location and infiltrate the place. He would not take the risk if he was not fully confident. He told Mu Yaja all his plans. Mu Yaja thought about it for a while and felt that the plan was feasible, so he agreed to it. Early the next morning, Mu Yaja would hold a board meeting and sign the share transfer document with Mu Lianjue. Before that, they had a full 10 hours to carry out the operation. Vermilion Bird thought coldly, 10 hours? That's enough. Her company would only need an hour to resolve this matter perfectly and bring the two lads back safely. Of course, it was not just a company. Gong Jie and Vermilion Bird arrived at Leji's headquarters. The meeting room had been temporarily changed into a battle command room. When they opened the door, they saw two companies of mercenaries standing in the meeting room. Mercenary Paradise's other ace leader, Anjia, was also present. The two companies that were present, added together, only had a total of 30 people. However, these 30 people were not to be underestimated. A month ago, there was political chaos in Libizan. Mercenary Paradise accepted the request and sent out two companies, which easily annihilated the armed forces of thousands of rioters. No matter how strong a team was, in front of the ace mercenaries of Mercenary Paradise, they would be unable to withstand a single blow. It would be difficult for them to even stand a chance. This was also one of the reasons why Mercenary Paradise had been the leader of the mercenary groups for the past 10 years, with no one able to shake their position. Vermilion Bird clapped her hands and walked to the conference table to gather everyone. She then simply assigned the operation plan. Anjie was in a camouflage uniform, but his handsome face was full of unruly contempt. In fact, as one of the 4 ace leaders of Mercenary Paradise, he was undoubtedly powerful. It was just that this operation was not difficult and did not require him to be involved. However, in order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he was also assigned to the operations department to participate in the plan. He crossed his arms and leaned against the door. His face was expressionless as he held a cigarette in his mouth. He looked frivolous and frivolous. After announcing the plan, the Vermilion Bird coldly shouted, "Is everything ready?" "Ready. Move out." On the side, Lisa stood up quietly. She lowered her eyes and lazily hugged her wrist joints, making cracking sounds. Everything was prepared in an orderly manner, as if there was a special kind of tacit understanding between the two of them, which happened to coincide with each other. Vermilion Bird walked up to Lisa. "Lisa, you sneak in and fight first. Take your men and retreat first. Leave the rest of the battlefield to me. Understand?" Lisa curled her lips in silence. She did not respond, but gave her an understanding look. Vermilion Bird had sent Lisa to lead the infiltration because she believed in her combat ability. Gong Jie walked into the CEO's office. The moment he opened the door, the room was empty. The CEO's office was designed according to Yu Yu's design. However, it was always used by Li Hanlin. Usually, Yu Yu worked in his study. It was not until recently that he moved his office to the CEO's office. Gong Jie walked to the bookcase. It was a row of reference books. Chapter 1208. He casually picked up an English reference book and flipped to the first page. It was filled with Yun Tianyou's footnotes. His neat and tidy English handwriting was delicate and beautiful. The corners of Gong Jie's eyes twitched violently. This child was truly heaven-defying to an indescribable extent. He could already master a foreign language so skillfully at such a young age. Then again, it made sense. programming required a strong foundation in a foreign language. Gong Jie wondered if this child had a genetic mutation. In a way, this child's talent was already beyond the realm of mortals. Gong Jie placed the reference book back on the bookshelf and surveyed the high-tech office. His gaze was attracted by a huge poster on the wall. It was a portrait of a celebrity. This was a set of fashion photos taken when Yun Shirshir and Gu Xingze were interviewed by a magazine back when they were filming a movie. The stylist and photographer were the best team in the industry. Hence, when this set of posters was released and exposed on Weibo, it attracted a lot of attention. This set of posters was so popular because the stylist posted 2 photos before and after the retouching on Weibo. One was the original photo, and the other was the edited version. The photos were exquisitely taken. In addition, other than the overall rendering of the images, Yun Shirshir's face could be omitted from the post-production digital embellishment. In the entertainment industry, many celebrities relied heavily on makeup and strong post-production for their photo shoots. For example, Han Yuyen's shortcoming was that the outline of her eyebrows was not deep enough. When taking photos of some international celebrities, a lot of effort was needed in post-production. Yun Shirshir was different. The post-production adjustments to her face could be said to be imperceptible. What was more amazing was that her makeup was very light and thin. Her facial features were still exquisite. There was an uproar in the industry. Yun Shirshir's beauty was also sought after by many international celebrities. Hence, Qin Zhou's hands were sore from accepting endorsements. This set of posters was the one that Yun Tianyu was most satisfied with. The overall style was a fresh garden style. She wore a pink dress with rose embellishments, which made her look pure and graceful. She wore a knitted corolla on her head, and her hair flowed elegantly. She held a bouquet of fresh flowers in her hand. As she sniffed the flowers, her beautiful eyes sparkled. Yun Tianyu loved this poster so much that he enlarged it and hung it on the wall of the office. Every time he looked up, he could see this poster. He often stared at this poster in a daze. Now, Gong Jie was also looking at this poster and fell into a state of shock. It was not because of anything else other than her facial features in the pictorial evoking a strong memory in him. Gong Jie walked up to the poster in a daze. His brows furrowed slightly as he reached out and caressed the poster with his slender fingers. The people in the picture were so lifelike that he momentarily forgot that it was just a poster in front of him. What was going on? Why did the woman in the poster overlap with the girl's bright and gentle smile in his memory? Was it her? How could it be? Gong Jie's breathing quickened. His fingertips suddenly trembled. Suspicion flashed across his eyes. Who was this woman? Who exactly was she? Chapter 1209. After more than a decade, a person's facial features would change as they grew older. However, the silhouette would not change. That pair of eyes, in particular, were exactly the same. Could there really be 2 people with the same face in this world? It couldn't be her, could it? Just as this thought popped up in his mind, Gong Jie ruthlessly overturned it. How could it be? She was already dead and no longer existed in this world. How could it be her? Gong Jie's emotions fluctuated slightly. His handsome face was filled with incredulity and doubt. He suddenly turned around and walked toward the door, only to bump into Li Hanlin, who had just pushed the door open. Second Master Gong? Li Hanlin was startled by his tense expression. Startled, he cautiously asked, "Master Gong, what's the matter?" Gong Jie suddenly grabbed his collar agitatedly. "Let me ask you, who is that woman? What's her name?" Gong Jie pointed at the woman in the poster and questioned him anxiously. Li Hanlin was baffled at first, but when he looked in the direction he was pointing, he saw Yun Shirshir's poster. He could not help feeling that Gong Jie's reaction was a little strange. "What's the matter, Master Gong? Answer me immediately." Gong Jie's expression was different from his usual elegance. He appeared nervous and anxious. "Answer me. Who is this woman? Why is her poster hanging here?" This Li Hanlin pursed his lips and calmly answered, "This is Director Yun's family." "Family? What family?" As for the specific relationship, Master Gong can ask Director Yun when he's back. Li Hanlin was cautious, though. Yun Tianyu had specially instructed him not to casually reveal his relationship with Yun Shishir to protect her. Therefore, without Yun Tianyu's permission, he naturally kept his mouth shut and did not reveal too much. Gong Jie frowned, but when he saw Li Hanlin's cautious and reserved expression, he did not pursue the matter. He anxiously smoothed his fringe, but his heart could not calm down. In the ward, Yun Shishir was drenched in cold sweat as she sat up from the bed. The darkness that entered her eyes made her feel uneasy as she looked around. "Muyaja?" Suddenly, there was the sound of a thin rope moving beside him. Then, a warm and broad hand gently covered the back of her hand. "I'm here." Yun Shishir nervously held his hand and did not let go. Muyaja sensed that something was wrong with her. He moved closer to her and hugged her shoulders. "What happened?" I dreamed that Yu and Xiao Chen were in danger." Yun Shishir's voice was filled with helplessness and sobbing. She didn't sleep well the whole night. She was always in a half-awake state, in a trance, and had nightmares. It was always related to Yu and Xiao Chen. In her dream, she actually dreamed that Yu and Xiao Chen were being chased by people. They were shot and bled to the ground. Only then did she wake up from her dream in a cold sweat. Muyaja hugged her tightly. "Don't be afraid. This is just a dream. It's just a nightmare." Muyaja reached out to turn on the light. "Pa!" The light flashed and turned on. Yun Shishir instantly felt that the light was dazzling and covered her eyes in discomfort. Her hands were suddenly taken away by him. Muyaja lowered his head and pressed his lips against hers, sealing her trembling lips. The kiss was lingering and enchanting. Chapter 12:10. "Don't be afraid. I'm here. Don't worry." She tossed and turned in bed the entire night. She even hid under the blanket and cried sadly behind his back. It wasn't as if he couldn't hear her sobbing. His heart ached. He was also worried about Yu and Xiao Chen's safety. Previously, he had repeatedly asked Yu if he needed to send more men to participate in his plan. Yu had the demeanor of a king. He waved his hand and said casually, "No need. Daddy's men aren't good enough. Daddy just needs to protect Mommy. That's enough." In other words, he was telling him that his men were well trained. This was undoubtedly a shot of confidence for him. Therefore, his most important task now was to stay by her side and accompany her without any distractions. This was what he had promised Yu. He had to do it. Yun Shishir was shocked. She closed her eyes, and her breathing quickened. Under the light, there was a faint tear at the corner of her eye. It was hard to notice. "When I was 9 years old, I lost my family and had nothing. I've already tasted the pain of losing a loved one. So now, I can't lose Xiao Chen, and Yu too." Muyaja frowned slightly. He might not be able to understand Yun Shishir's uneasiness and worry as a mother. However, as a father, he also felt inexplicably anxious and worried. However, he needed to deal with this matter calmly. The first thing he needed to do was to stabilize her emotions. Shishir. He lowered his head and whispered her name. Yun Shishir looked up and heard him say in a deep voice, "When the two little guys come home, let's get married." Let's get married and be together forever, okay? Yun Shirshir looked up in shock. She was obviously shocked by his words. Was this a proposal? He held her hand, bowed his head, and gently kissed her fingertips. He said tenderly, I've thought about it carefully. I don't want to delay the marriage any longer. When this is over, let's get married and be together for the rest of our lives. Yun Shirshir opened her eyes in a daze. For a moment, her heart was filled with mixed feelings, and she found it difficult to digest. Promise me, Don't let your imagination run wild. Yun Shirshir was still in a daze. Mu Yaja suddenly felt a little nervous. What happened? He turned her shoulder and looked at her inquisitively. You don't want to? Yun Shirshir shook her head. I just couldn't believe that such a day would come. Trust me, there will be. Mu Yaja kissed her gently and pressed against her forehead. He promised, there will be. In the underground warehouse, Yu, who had always been a clean freak, gently brushed the dust off her sleeves. Her thin face was calm and composed, without a trace of fear. Outside the iron prison, a few soldiers stared at her with their mouths agape. This child was way too calm. Her face was indifferent and expressionless. If it were any other child, they would probably be wailing in panic by now, wouldn't they? Hey kid, I didn't know that you're a clean freak. A man couldn't help but tease. Since they were guarding the two children, they naturally let down their guard. Yu glanced at them coldly and asked, What time is it? Why are you asking about the time for no reason? It's 12 o'clock. Chapter 12:11. Mui Chen turned around and looked at him in surprise. Yu pursed his lips silently. It was not that he had a timer on him, but he had been silently calculating the time in his head ever since he was locked up. Although it was impossible for him to be accurate, it was not far off. In this aspect, his concept of numbers was unbelievably sharp. The man was stunned. He looked down at his watch and was shocked. 11:30 a.m. Not a minute off. The man frowned suspiciously. How did this child know the time so accurately? Could it be, thinking of this, he opened the cell door and walked in front of him? He searched him from head to toe, but did not find anything suspicious. The man was even more surprised. Hence, he asked, How did you know what time it is? You said lazily, I guessed. The man was still skeptical. He felt that there was something fishy, but he could not find any loopholes. He could not help but pat his face. Kid, I'm warning you. Don't play any tricks. You understand? Even if I play any tricks, what can you do to me? Yu raised his eyebrows and retorted coldly. There was a hint of mockery in his cold voice. It was undoubtedly a provocation to the man. The man laughed coldly and used the way he usually used to scare children to scare him. So what? I can kill you and feed you to the dogs. Mu Yichen was furious when he heard this. However, Yu said casually, If you kill me, you'll die with me. The man was stunned, but he said disapprovingly, Why do I have to die with you? Because I can't die. Otherwise, how can your master use me as a hostage to get Mu Corporation's shares? Yuyu's lips curled into a mocking smile. The man was so shocked that his jaw dropped. It was not easy to fool children these days. They were all cunning. The man snorted. Good. Kid, you know a lot. But there's one thing you're wrong about. Hostages don't have to be kept alive. By the time Fourth Master gets the shares of Mu Group, your life will be over. Yu heard his unfriendly tone and threatening gaze, but her face remained calm. She only smiled slightly and said, Why? You want to kill the hostage? The man was even more shocked in his heart. This little guy looked no more than 5 or 6 years old, but whether it was his temperament or the way he spoke, they were all quite mature. The man smirked. What's wrong? Are you afraid of killing the hostage? So, If you don't know your place and keep your mouth shut, I don't mind giving you a taste of my power. You raised his eyebrows lazily. His eyes were as cold as stars, but it was as if he was deliberately provoking him. He mocked coldly, other than threatening to kill the hostage. What else do you have? Aren't you childish? You dash. The man was furious and grabbed his collar. He frowned and said, Boy, you're deliberately going against me. Do you really think I won't dare to beat you? Suddenly, a strange noise came from behind him. The man's attention was attracted, and he was about to turn around to find out what was going on when you smirked coldly. What are you laughing at? The man hated his smile. It always made his heart numb uncontrollably and made him feel uneasy. I'm laughing at your stupidity. You straightened his back. He had an arrogant and domineering aura. He had inherited Mu Yaja's indifference and arrogance. Chapter 12:12. You're about to die, yet you're still so arrogant. Little brat, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. The man smiled, strangely squatted down, and patted his cheeks. The corners of his lips curled up, and the viciousness in his eyes was like a sharp knife, merciless and bloodthirsty. He tilted his head and looked at him, then frowned and asked in confusion, Little brother, how do you want to die? I can't think of an interesting way to torture you, but you're really an eyesore. What should I do? Ha! Who's the one who's about to die? You mocked mercilessly. His childish voice carried an aura like that of an Azura. The man was shocked, and then his face became angry. He raised his fist in a frenzy, intending to teach this little brat a lesson. However, before he could punch him, he saw his body stiffen and then tremble violently. Without a sound, a bright-colored tattoo blossomed on his chest like a flower. Ugh, he felt that his chest had been ruthlessly penetrated. He turned his eyes stiffly and lowered his head to look at his chest that had been penetrated by a silenced bullet. He frowned, and before he could understand what was going on, his body swayed, and he fell to the ground. The moment he fell, Lisa stood upright behind him. She coldly glanced at the man from the corner of her eyes and lifted her leg to kick him away. Hindrance. Mui-chen was shocked. The girl in front of him clearly had the aura of 8 or 9 years old, but for some reason she had a dangerous aura of death on her body. An aura like that of an Azura. It was said that girls were like a flower. However, if he had to use a flower to describe her, then it would be the red spider lily, the gentleness of a demon, according to legend, the flower that willingly entered hell and was sent back by the demons, but still lingered on the road to the underworld. The demons couldn't bear it, so they agreed to let her bloom on the road to guide and comfort the souls leaving the human world. Beautiful, but deadly dangerous. Xiao Yichen looked at her in a daze. The girl had a beautiful and delicate face, softening the gentle beauty of the East and the deep European bloodline. However, her eyes were empty and cold, but filled with murderous intent, like a war machine that existed for the sake of killing. She had no 7 emotions and 6 desires. Mu Yichen's gaze trailed down and was immediately stunned by her toned and powerful muscles. No wonder he didn't notice when she appeared, even though he was well-trained. What kind of cruel and terrifying training did she have to go through to reach such a level? She was like a ghost, silent and without a trace. How did she manage to sneak in without anyone noticing? Mu Yichen glanced at the corpse at her feet with lingering fear. A hint of wariness surfaced on his face. Who are you? Lisa looked at him and walks to him. You, Shu. Lisa glared at him coldly. She put her finger to her lips and silently signaled for him to keep quiet. Big brother, she's my bodyguard, replied the boy blandly. Little Yichen, an 8 or 9 year. Just as he was in a mess, Lisa squatted down beside him aimed the gun at the chains that locked his wrists, and pulled the trigger. Clang! The chains broke. Lisa then broke the chains on his ankles. Mu Yichen's limbs were finally free. Lisa walked to Yu's side and bent down. Chapter 12:13. Mu Yichen stood up and walked out of the cell. His face turned pale with fright. Outside the cell, there were a few cold corpses lying on the floor. Some of them were sitting close to the wall with their heads tilted to one side. Their eyes were wide open, and red and white stains were splattered on the wall. Some of them were lying on the floor in a strange posture. Blood was flowing on the floor like a river. They seemed to have been dealt with silently. They did not even have time to react before they died. What was more frightening was that they did not struggle at all. Mu Yichen was shocked. When did this happen? Could it be that these people were dealt with by that girl? He had never seen anyone with such terrifying skills. He was actually able to get rid of more than 10 people in one go without him noticing. Some of these people were well-trained assassins. The rest were Special Forces soldiers with extraordinary aptitude in the military. Special Forces soldiers. What kind of concept was that? They were agile and had outstanding awareness. There was no doubt about their combat ability. Yet, this girl had relied on her own strength to take care of all of them. The air was filled with the smell of blood. Mu Yichen was so shocked that he could not control himself. The impact of the scene was so strong that he was a little dazed. Suddenly, Mu Yichen thought of something. He quickened his pace and looked at the corpses one by one. However, when he saw a corpse leaning against the wall, he was stunned and immediately walked over. The man leaning against the wall had a hideous and terrifying scar on his face. His expression was one of terror. His eyeballs were bulging, and there was no sign of struggle. Obviously, he was dealt with in an instant. Mu Yichen looked at him deeply. There was a hint of pain on his face. He suddenly raised his hand and covered his eyes with his trembling hand. He felt a little sad and pain in his heart. "I'm sorry." His lips trembled slightly as he uttered these 3 words. In fact, in his world, there was a clear distinction between good and evil. There was a clear distinction between right and wrong. Initially, he was filled with hatred and contempt towards this man. However, he gradually realized that this man was different from the others. On the surface, he looked ferocious. With a hideous scar on his face, he looked like a malicious ghost. But if he didn't have this scar, he would be a kind-looking man. Mu Yichen had always been grateful. When he was being tortured, it was this man who came and stopped him at the right time. It was also this man who gave his porridge to them. At that time, he was injured and had a fever. It was also this man who took off his jacket and gave it to him. In his mind, the words that the scarred man had said to him suddenly rang out. "I don't have any other intentions towards you. I just feel that there's still some conscience in my heart that I can't get over." Suddenly, images flashed before his eyes. The knife-scarred man was sitting outside the iron prison. When he looked at him, there was a trace of genuine tenderness in his eyes. "I have a daughter, too. She's about the same age as you. The reason why I'm doing this is to give my daughter a better life. But I realized that I seem to have taken the wrong path. I've decided that once I'm done with this, I'll wash my hands of this business." Chapter 12:14. "Kid, don't worry. When the time comes, I'll secretly let you go and let you reunite with your son. You're a smart kid. Don't make a fuss, understand? Bear with it. When they're resting, I'll create an opportunity to let you go." Mu Yichen stood up slowly and gave him a solemn military salute. "Shao Yichen?" At this moment, Yu had also been unchained and walked over. "Hurry up and leave. Someone will be here soon. We won't be able to leave." Just as he finished speaking, he heard someone open the locked door of the warehouse in the dark. The next second, the door suddenly opened wide. A wave of fully armed soldiers walked in with their guns raised. The lights in the warehouse were instantly turned on. The leader of the soldiers walked in. However, when his gaze fell on the corpses all over the floor, he was stunned. "What's going on?" He shouted, but no one responded. The people who were assigned to guard the warehouse had all been killed by Lisa, so no one responded. His eyes widened in shock as he slowly looked around. All 12 of them had been killed without a sound. The scene was very clean. There were no traces of a struggle at all. He widened his eyes in disbelief. His eyeballs were about to pop out of their sockets. He raised his head and looked at the 3 children. Complicated and bewildered emotions flashed across his face. Then, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Could this be the work of the 3 children? Lisa shielded Yu behind her. Mui Chen also looked at them cautiously. "Hold them down," the man ordered sternly. Lisa said coldly, "I'll cover you. You guys retreat." Mu Yichen did not say anything. He grabbed Yu's arm and ran toward the back door. There was an iron gate that was originally tightly sealed. However, no matter how intricate the lock was, in Lisa's hands, she could pry open 20 locks in a minute while blindfolded. It was completely vulnerable. The man was shocked and shouted, "Catch those 2 children. Don't let them run away." One of the soldiers raised his pistol and aimed at Mu Yichen's calf. However, Lisa was 1 step ahead of him. She raised her gun and fired. In the blink of an eye, it naturally flew out of the barrel, cut through the air, and aimed at the pistol in the soldier's hand. Pung! The bullet accurately hit the muzzle of the handgun in the soldier's hand. The handgun made a deafening sound and exploded in the soldier's hand. The poor soldier's hand was covered in blood from the explosion. His hand that was holding the gun was blown apart, and he let out a cry of pain. The captain was stunned. He did not expect this seemingly harmless young girl to have such superb marksmanship. "Kill her." He issued another order. However, the girl suddenly put away her gun and pulled out a short dagger from her waist belt. Her figure flashed, and her nimble figure rushed into the crowd like a ghost. She raised the short dagger in her hand. Under the light, the short dagger shone with a cold and deadly light. Poof! A line of blood splattered. The captain who was giving orders just now was the first to have his neck slit by her. In just a moment, his face was hideous. He held his neck and fell to the ground. The others were even more shocked. However, they reacted quickly and aimed their guns at her. Chapter 12:15. Along with the miserable cries that rose and fell one after another, a few people in the crowd actually fell down, sparsely. "Shoot her! Shoot her!" Someone screamed, as if he had seen a ghost. The next second, a cold blade was pressed against his neck. In an instant, his flesh was exposed, and hot blood splashed onto the others. Lisa was a famous melee killer. Her attacks were fast, accurate, and ruthless, leaving no room for maneuver. Often, when these people were still aiming, their necks would be slit. Once she attacked, the result would be fatal. "Shoot! Shoot!" However, before he could finish his sentence, a series of orderly footsteps came from behind him. So many people bullying a child. Child abuse? Interesting. A bright voice suddenly sounded in the empty underground caisson. There was a hint of cynicism in his tone. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and stood up abruptly to look around. They turned around and looked back and forth, but they didn't find any unfamiliar figures. Everyone looked at each other, obviously not knowing where the voice came from. At this moment, a poof sound was heard, and the sound of a silenced gunshot echoed in the silent warehouse. In the crowd, The man who was aiming at Lisa and was about to shoot fell to the ground. The bullet hit him in the middle of his eyebrows, and there was a hole with blood flowing out. Everyone's faces were filled with shock, and they became even more solemn. Everyone present was an elite Special Forces soldier, and each of them had extraordinary skills. However, someone actually broke through the guards outside the caisson and broke in. What was infuriating was that, at this moment, he was like a ghost shadow lurking in a place they did not know and could easily take their lives. One of the soldiers shouted angrily, "Who is it? Come out." The voice replied lazily, "What a bunch of good-for-nothings." The ghostly voice gradually approached, and it was almost next to the person's ear. The soldier's body stiffened, and he subconsciously wanted to turn around, but a pair of hands mercilessly climbed onto his shoulders. In the blink of an eye, his throat was tightly gripped, and Jie stood beside him with a smile, holding Colt tightly with one hand, and pressed it against his temple. He whispered in his ear, "I'm here." Who are you?" Jie smiled gently and raised his head proudly. He recited his impressive opening speech as if he was reciting a book. "I am the Mercenary Paradise's chief commander, Master Anjia, who is loved by everyone, who